What's really good, everybody? This is Nathan Allebach, and welcome to the podcast where we get into people's stories and go down a bunch of rabbit holes about what's really good in the world. One quick announcement before jumping into this thing. I officially decided recently that I'm going to be launching a Twitch account for live streaming similar content to this show, and I'm going to be having on like a lot of repeat guests that I've already had on What's Really Good and touching on a lot of similar subject matter, but also going in for more solo episodes and just kind of ramblings to get to know more of like the people that I've gotten to know through this show so far. The reason I'm doing it essentially is because it's like the happy medium where I don't have to do much post-production work, which, you know, if you've listened to this show, you know I've complained a lot about just how much time it takes editing these episodes to get them to be at the level of quality that I think is appropriate for a podcast. And, you know, doing Twitch, there's just a lower bar to entry because it's live streaming and it's just more immersive. So I'll be still doing the podcast, just doing a lot more Twitch coming starting in September, I think. So stay tuned on that. I'll have more on it soon. But anyway, for today's episode, I had on my friend Kevin Cox. Kevin is a math teacher at Frankford Friends School in Philly and a fellow songwriter who I met a few years back and I've gotten to know pretty well, and just a really great guy, and I was really excited to have this conversation with him. Every time we hang out, it's always good talks. So we hit a range of stuff throughout this whole episode. We talked a lot about problems with our local music scene, you know, what it was like getting into songwriting for Kevin, and also just we kind of share a similar trajectory in growing up and kind of like having to adjust in the adult world as being an artist, you know, like figuring out financial responsibility and goals and like how you see yourself the older you get. And yeah, there was a lot. And also like one of the big ones that I thought was really interesting is just kind of Kevin got into what it's like teaching kids nowadays in the age of the internet, which is just an ongoing crazy subject. And he was really candid with his experiences and shared a lot of unique insights that I think you'll all find interesting on like the education system. And yeah, we also got into the tragedy of Kevin's best friend Brad passing away a couple years ago after being hit by a drunk driver, which is just, I mean, I don't know, there's no words, right? I mean, we talked about just what it's been like for him processing the whole event, and you know, and everything that just comes with dealing with death of a loved one. You know, the existential questions and feeling just hopelessness, and then trying to find hope and meaning in it when it feels like so meaningless and just horrible, you know. And yeah, I mean, it was super heavy. He's talked about it a lot publicly. He's been very candid about his experiences, and I think it's super important that we all talk about that because, you know, it's something that each one of us experience on some level throughout life. And yeah, so I was really appreciative of how open he was on that. Just one last thing, you might notice a slight dip in audio quality for the episode. It's not that bad, but there's a little echo in the room that I tried to edit around and really couldn't get into it. So sorry, you probably wouldn't even have noticed it if I didn't say something, but yeah. Kevin's a great guy, and I really love this conversation, so I hope you guys take something from it as well. Now let's get into what's really good. Kevin, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nate. It's great to see you.
I'm glad we're doing it. We were talking a few moments ago, and I was telling you that I am running on a very little amount of sleep, and I'm not responsible for the things I might say. Limited brain power right now, but we had to do it. This is like, I think this is the third or the fourth time I think we rescheduled.
Yeah, I think it's the third, but I really did think that we were going to need to reschedule after I got that text. I was like, well, maybe as long as we get it in before the school year, it'll probably be pretty easy. But
were you disappointed? Like, did you get that sinking feeling, like, again?
No, not really. I mean, I think if it had been a different excuse, I might have. But
if I was like, I don't just feel up to it.
Yeah, I would have been like, dude, come on. Like, you can't just not feel up to it this time. But when you miss a flight, yeah, I mean, I was like, there's no way, because I put myself in your shoes, and I was like, I would feel so bad right now if I had to reschedule again, but at the same time, like,
You're
that's
an empathetic dude. And we know each other too, so I think that makes it a little better. I don't know.
Yeah.
If there was only a slight acquaintance there, maybe there'd be a little bit more of an awkward, wait, does this guy actually want to talk to me?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? 'Cause I get that vibe from other people that ask to be on the show or that I invite on the show because this is the 60th or so episode, I think. And that's over the course of a little over a year. And I think in that time, so that's it comes out to a episode a week, right? But I've invited or other people have asked me to come on the show. There's probably 300 or 400 people, and a lot of them say yes. So it's there's always this running list of people that are oh, I'd love to come on the show, and I'll be I'd love to have you on the show, and I really would. But scheduling it and actually keeping a diverse range of topics and people, it's really tough to narrow it down to get everybody on because we were talking earlier, it just takes so long to produce the thing.
Yeah. Well, I knew you wanted to talk to me, and I knew I wanted to talk to you. I have this whiteboard in my room of stuff, a lot of creative stuff that I want to get done, and it's just been the same stuff written there for a long time.
Oh no, you haven't checked anything off?
No. But this podcast has been on there.
Okay.
So today when I go home, Christy will be very happy, my girlfriend, that I'm going to erase something from that board.
It's going to feel good. That's such a creative person thing to do, to have a whiteboard in your house and stuff. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, it's different than, with teaching, you have a push towards whatever, tasks need to get done that are held by a deadline that's the next day. But with creative stuff, it's not.
Right.
I don't have a record deal or something where they're oh, you got to do this and that. It's all up to me.
It's all in your own time.
Stays on the whiteboard.
That's it, man. Well, we were talking before the show. There's a lot we could get into here. And just to kind of keep it on a rough trajectory, I think it'd be cool to start with songwriting because that's essentially how we met. So, I guess let's kind of go back to the beginning before we had anything to do with each other. What initially got you into music or songwriting growing up?
Well, I think music had always kind of been there in my life. When I was younger, sports were really the forefront. Mm-hmm. I was a multi-sport athlete. When I was baseball was the thing that I was the most into when I was 14 and younger.
Okay.
Got really into basketball and played football, ran track, all these things. So that was always in the forefront in my childhood, but music was always kind of there. I was in choirs in school. And I remember I was in the select choir in middle school, which as a sixth grader, which was only 5 sixth graders that made it or something.
Big deal.
So yeah, I was I guess I'm, I don't know. Thought I was cool, but I don't know. And that was always something I was proud of, and I was appreciative to be parts of those groups. But I didn't start playing an instrument until my friend Brad started playing guitar and was in a band, The Go Around. And I just thought it was cool. So I asked him to teach me, and he taught me a few chords. And I was around 16, I think, over a summer, started learning. And he really taught me just a few chords and how to read the tabs and things online. And I started to kind of learn some songs. And pretty quickly after that, I started writing, though. Definitely too early for it to be any sort of worth. I didn't know how to play guitar, but I was writing songs.
Oh my gosh.
So,
dude, get this. I don't think I've ever said this on the podcast. I've definitely never said this on the podcast before. I started writing way too early as well. I think I was in 8th grade. I had a crush on this girl, and I remember I didn't know how to play piano, and I had not even a clue. And I thought it'd be the most romantic thing ever to write her a song on piano. And I tried to do this chord progression, and I still remember it to this day. I could play it on a piano for sure. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but it was super simplistic, and instead of writing a song the way a seasoned musician would do, I wrote this chord progression thing and then just awkwardly tried to sing over it, not in sync with the melody of the chord progression whatsoever. It was just the worst thing ever. I think I recorded it in GarageBand. I forget if I put it online, MySpace, because it was in the MySpace days.
Oh, yeah.
And it was horrible. And that spurred then a couple year period where I could barely play an instrument, but I would still record in GarageBand all these terrible songs and upload them to MySpace. And yeah, there's still some horror footage out there, I think, that I could find to send young songwriters to be hey, this was me. Yeah, it's always bad in the beginning.
Yeah. I think I might have some of these terrible songs on a CD somewhere.
Ooh.
It wasn't even. I think I recorded them in Audacity.
Nice. Oh, it's a good program.
Yeah. Well, if you know how to use it at all, I have no idea.
Yeah, you're just like bare bones recording into it.
This is so embarrassing. I just remembered this. We didn't have a microphone. Like, we didn't have like a microphone like this or like anything you would record in a studio. We took the Rock Band microphone and it had a USB thing. So I was like, we can just plug this into the computer.
No.
And we used that. And I mean, I guess looking back now, you would expect it to be horrible, and it was horrible, but it was a little bit better than you'd expect. But it was really fuzzy, and I had no idea how to edit or anything.
That's amazing. It's great to I think I think it's cool to start from that place because it's so much more authentic, and it's one of those things that if you look back on it as an adult, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as cringy, and you can be like, oh, like, why did I do that? And there's always going to be part of that there. You're always going to feel that, like, regret and cringe and what was going on in my head. But at the same time, you could look back on it and be like, that was like the start, right? That was like what got me creatively juiced up to actually produce something on my own, even though it was terrible by today's standards. I mean, it's all relative, right? It's like the first thing you did.
And it's a good reminder when you constantly hit walls where you feel like you can't reach the next level, and then you look back and it's like, I mean, it's literally there, like as bad as it gets. Yeah. And from there till now, I mean, I even... since then, I've recorded 2 records that I'm actually proud of. I think are pretty good. But the second one, I would say, I feel is like way better than the first, and that was in a difference of like a year.
Yeah,
and I am confident that if I kept working on things hard, it's going to get better and better. But that's partially because I remember that stuff. I'm like, it was really bad back then.
Right.
And
yeah, it's like it's good to have that perspective and then to keep all the tools in the toolkit sharpened. It's like both those things at the same time. It's like having the constant introspection to look at yourself right now versus you a year ago and 5 years ago and be like, okay, even though it might feel bad right now, no matter where I'm at in life, I can still see like a pattern of growth in some capacity, and then also that continual using that introspection to actually grow intentionally, what I mean? Like actually put work into whether it's music or anything else to better yourself in those ways. I mean, those two things locked together, that's a key to a good life. Maybe not a successful life, but a good life, right?
Yeah.
That's like what more can you ask for?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. It's just I do, and I see that in everything that I'm doing in my life. Teaching the same thing. You look back a year till now. There's so many things that get better. I mean, honestly, the only thing that I find like frustrating about all that is like, I know I could get really good at so many different things that I think are cool, but you don't have time to do all of them.
You got to pick one.
Yeah. So it's like, I know if I quit teaching and did just music, I would get really good at it.
Right.
I'd become a much better guitar player. I'd become a much better writer and all those things. Just don't think I'd have any money, And I know if I put everything else aside and just focused on teaching, I could become a better teacher faster. But you can't really live like that, though.
Don't you wish you could, though? Like,
yeah.
It is kind of sad that you can't. Like, it would be great if it was somewhat of an option, Because I think there's a difference between, for some people maybe listening to this, I mean, this is all theoretical. Maybe there's no one listening to this out there in the ether. But just theoretically, I could imagine someone listening to this and thinking, well, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we could all just bum around and do what we want and that would just be like enough to get by or whatever. But that's not what you're saying.
No.
I mean, I think there's a difference between someone just kind of bumming around, like, moseying through life, doing hobbies, versus someone who is passionate about some form of art or craft and would otherwise put the resources into that, but they physically are incapable of doing so because of living in the system that we're in, where you aren't able to do that because you lose money and you lose resources and you lose precious time, which is all part of, both of us being in our late 20s. It's like, that even if it is relative to a degree, or even if it's a quote-unquote social construct, that social construct is in place for a reason because people within the social construct treat it like it's real. So it is real. Like, your age plays into your career and like the relationships you're going to have and just how the future of your life is going to unfold. So it sucks you have to consider all that with your art,
I guess I am in my late 20s now. I just turned 26 in May.
I was gonna say you just crossed the barrier.
And then when you said that, I was like, no, wait. I mean, that's
you
fair.
Can mid-20s.
I can hold that but really,
right.
though, it's the same. I mean, it's also the feeling, right, too. It's like, I'm not in that just out of college, do whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll live at home for a while, all that stuff. I mean, that's fine if you're 26 and still living at home. That's not what I mean. But, like, I'm hitting the point where I've had a girlfriend for a long time, and it's been almost 3 years, and we just moved in together. I've been teaching for a few years. Like, it is crossing into that next phase where it's like, people want to go out on a Friday or Saturday. I'm like, not really. Like, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, even with music, it's like, I don't really want to go out to a show or even play a show myself where I'm not getting home till 1 a.m. Like, what do you mean? It is that next, like, it's that next step. I am in my late 20s,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it's with teaching, like, yeah, I could put it on pause for a while and do it later, but like you said, it affects everything else. If I do that and I'm just playing music and it doesn't work out, which I have no reason to really believe that it would. Maybe I'm cynical now, but it's just like, what am I going to be doing then?
Right.
I would have no option but to be living at home, which my parents would be fine with. They're great and loving and supportive, but I don't know what else that would bring me.
Yeah, I think most musicians or songwriters in their young adult years, they reach that tipping point where you go one of two ways. I mean, this is kind of this is parallel to most ways of life. I mean, you either stay in that hyper optimistic, idealistic camp, and you just keep believing in yourself and just kind of not aimlessly, but you know what I mean, just kind of foolhardily going forward with whatever it is you're doing, or you go the complete opposite way, which is just ultra cynical and just being a hyper realist and being like, well, nothing really matters. People don't really care. I'm on my own. I have to make money. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about paying my bills, being an adult, etc. And then you just move that direction. And most people, if those are two extremes, most people are somewhere in the middle, right? Like, you kind of find like whatever balance works for you. And I think most musicians, they lean into that hyper idealistic side because of the artist mentality of just being open to possibility and experience, and you believe in yourself, and it's your craft. Like, you want to express yourself and hope that people will care. But I think there's something to be said about, again, being introspective and just having that realization at one point. Like you said, it's not like you're old, but you're reaching that point in your own life journey where it's like you said, you've been teaching for a while, you're in a relationship, you're on your own living as an adult, and you start to think about the consequences of things on a monthly basis. Like, I have these bills to pay, I have these responsibilities, maybe these are some future short-term goals I have, like I want to start a family or whatever it might be. And as you consider those things, you start to think in more broad cultural, financial terms, rather than just being like, well, if I keep pursuing this craft, maybe I'll make it next year or the next year. You start to have a broader lens that you see things through, and that can easily slide the other way into cynicism, like you're saying. But I think it's good to have that balanced perspective, because you really, as you get older, like I said, time isn't on your side. Like, you have to, while you can, put in the work and understand that the kind of stepping stones you're putting in front of you right now, they it's not like they have to define the rest of your life, but for most people they do.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not like a hardcore determinist, like it doesn't have to be that way. But if you just look at probability, like most people, what they fall in line with in their 20s ends up being like the trajectory of their life, roughly at least. So it does matter to think about that stuff.
I mean, and I've stopped saying, but did say not too long ago, that eventually I would stop teaching to do music full time. But the thing is that I didn't really understand is that I was going to grow to love teaching. Like, it's not that I have a job that I'm like, God, I can't wait to get out of here. And,
right.
I mean, you have those days where you're like, wow, I'm tired. I can't wait to go home. But I mean, even having this whole summer break, do I want to go back to school? Not really, but actually I do.
Yeah.
Like, I actually miss the kids that I know I'm going back to work with, and I actually miss that environment. And while I would happily make summer longer, I do like my job.
Yeah.
And that's something that, even though like every job there's cons, it's like I'm not going to leave this to go for music, where I still have some of the optimism in myself, but I really don't in the music scene, especially in Philadelphia. Like I just don't see it. Like it almost doesn't even exist to me.
Really?
It's like there are people that are good musicians who are out there playing, but there's like to no career end.
Yeah.
It's like you can practice here, but you can't really be a professional here unless you're going to play cover gigs and all that stuff, which is fine. But like that's not my vision. Like I just went to a Switchfoot show. Switchfoot's my favorite band. I've seen them like double-digit times. Love them to death. And like I got some of that inspiration back being at their show because I'm watching John Foreman run around the stage and like in this room of people at the Fillmore who are in love with what's going on. You know, they're in love with the messages of Switchfoot, the positivity, the hope, like all this stuff that has like changed my life. That's what I want to do. But like...
But how do you get there?
Yeah, and I know I could write songs that are like that. Like I have that confidence. I know if I was on a tour for a long time, I would be able to muster the energy that it takes every day to go out there and do that stuff. But there's a lot of cons you don't think about when you're younger. And again, looking around in Philadelphia, I'm just like, I don't really see that there's those like people who can push you to that level, and that's why people like move to Nashville or LA or wherever else.
It sounds like it's largely an infrastructure problem that you're thinking about. Because I think about it in terms of it kind of works both ways, right? Because if you go to New York City or Nashville or LA, like the kind of big popular music cities that everyone goes to, and you go, if you ever go to just even like an open mic in New York City, you're bound to see some incredible musicians, because everybody has the thought that you just laid out, whereas like if you want to make it, essentially you have to go to one of these places. And I think the positive is just that you have more opportunity. There's more people with the right eyeballs on those cities, like the record labels, the producers. Like there's people scouting them much more so than the average American city, and that counts for something. And then there's more, because of that, there's more venues, there's more open mics, there's more places to get connected if you know the right people, which is always another story. It's always hard to it's hard for anywhere to get connected. But so there's that side of it. But then there's also kind of the negative side of it, or I should say the positive side of it then, because in terms of Philly being not like those cities, you get to kind of you get at least more of an opportunity to be a big fish in a small pond. Yeah. And then that kind of expands outward. Like the best songwriter in, nowhere town, Idaho or whatever might suck if they move to Philly. And then if the best songwriter in Philly moves to New York City, they might suck. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a lot of relativity there, but I know what you mean. Like there's a lot of amazing talented musicians in the Philadelphia area that I've known for 10, 12 years in some cases, and a lot of them have still not gotten like virtually any recognition. Right. And they're people that I willingly listen to, like on Spotify or Bandcamp or whatever. Like I like their music that much. Yeah. And it just seems like there's no infrastructure in place to get them to that next level. They've been doing it forever. It's not even like, oh, this is like a new act. Like maybe they just haven't been picked up yet. Like they've been on the radar. They have the connections. They just haven't, for whatever reason, been able to cultivate a fan base or a media connection base in the city. And it is kind of confusing when you look at it in that way.
Yeah, and I think part of that where I get stuck is like all the techniques that you could try to market yourself. I feel like there's like you still need to have a group to market to. Like and I think there's a lot of things that I see bands do or I'll read like, oh, you should do this, this, and this. I'm like, yeah, I could do all those things. Like I really believe in myself that I could do the things that it takes to grow the fan base. It's just that getting from friends and family to actual like a fan base is like a brick wall.
Right.
And I haven't really seen tips for how to break that. And I think a lot of people are at that level where it's like, or I'll say this, friends and family and other musicians. Like
right, so musicians support each other.
Yeah. And we get what people are going through. And we get what it takes to make a record, and we can respect that craft. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like taking that step to get through that. I don't know. And I feel like it's weird because you can even play on WMMR and play on 104.5 and like do these things that, again, when you're a kid sounds like
the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. And then it's just like, well, you know, you were live at 5 and people were listening on the way home, but no one like got home and looked up your account.
Right, it wasn't inspiring enough for them to be like, oh my God, who was that?
Yeah, like, wow, I just have to buy all their records, which you can't even do. I just, just can't wait to add them on Apple Music. Like, people won't even do that.
It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
That's rough. Yeah, no, I 100% understand. And part of me, I fall more toward the cynical end of this concept, only because I've kind of recently just come to terms with, I'll call it like a spectrum of talent within songwriting, right? And I try to be a hyper realist in terms of like understanding the hierarchy and like where I fit on this spectrum, like in terms of who's below me, who's above me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You can kind of point to certain musicians, point to certain people in the area, and just I try to think to myself, like, what are the things that are doing better than me? What are the things they're doing worse than me? And I try to be like, and obviously this is all, it's in part inevitably subjective, because there's always going to be subjectivity to style and all that, but I think you can obtain a level of objectivity just in terms of pure talent, pure songwriting ability, pure production quality, charisma. Like, these are all things that you can, or even branding, like what kind of merch or whatever. Like, these are all things you can objectively point to, and like you could put person A and person B next to each other and be like, this is better than that. Like, even maybe I like the B better, but like A clearly looks better and is marketed better, etc. So all that said, I think what really sucks is that wall you're talking about, where most musicians can't get past the family, friends, and fellow musician fan base type of thing. It's because, like, the truth is, it really is tough to make to that upper echelon. I mean, there's a reason that top charts exist. There's a reason only so many musicians get signed to record labels and all that. I mean, it's not just a supply and demand issue. I mean, it's also just the fact that when you get to those upper levels, there's certain qualities that come into play that sometimes are almost unexplainable. Like, there's certain musicians I can point toward and look at the time in their career when they took off or whatever, and I can start to think their music was good, but it wasn't amazing. Like, what set them apart? Like, why did they get picked up by this record label or whatever? And oftentimes it has to do with things like their looks, literally. Like, how attractive are they? Or like, and not even like in the conventional sense, but sometimes guys or girls that have like a dark feeling, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of mysterious, like a vibe they give off. Maybe it's emo or introverted or whatever. And just that presence, maybe it's the way they cup the mic when they sing. You know what I mean? There's certain things that you can do as a performer in your stage presence, in your clothing that you choose to wear, your makeup, whatever, that attracts a certain audience. And all it can take, and sometimes, is that to give you the edge to get to that next level. You know what I mean? It could be the most minor thing, but it creates a draw then for, like you said, a specific group to market toward. And I think that is the thing in many cases that separates the lower rung that people like you or I are on versus that upper echelon, and then the higher upper echelons, where you separate the people who've had like regional success, national success, international success. Most of it's talent, some of it's luck, and then some of it is just like the ability to market yourself in a unique way. And I think when you look at the local scene, I see a lot of talent. Like, there's a ton of talent, but there's a lot of lacking in like the marketing department and the things that make you stand out in your demographic. You know what I mean? Like, those are the two like toss-ups that make it actually challenging, I think, to get people to, like you're saying, want to seek your music out online.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is, like, when I think about the lack of infrastructure, I just think about the lack of, like, I think the Philly, and when I say Philly, I mean like the suburbs surrounding too.
Greater Philadelphia,
Phoenixville, and Westchester and everything. I think there's a lot of musicians support, meaning like songwriters will support each other and like, oh, you need me to play guitar in your band? Cool, I'll do that a couple times. But there's not a lot of like people who want to be on a team, and maybe I just haven't, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that people are listening and are like, no, you're wrong. I'm here. But
please email Kevin if this is the case.
Yeah. Make sure link my email address so they're like, but I feel like there just aren't people who are like very willing to play a strong supportive role on a team for an artist. And I include myself in that. Like, I think there's a lot of frontmen. You know, there's a lot of people that have their band or their project, and rightly so for a lot of reasons. They're good songwriters and that sort of thing. But I don't see a lot of people who are like, I'm going to go join this group to be like the number 2 guy.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
I'm going to go join this group to be like their drummer and really focus in on them, and I'll do marketing for them. Like, I don't see a lot of that. It does happen, and I think those bands are more successful. But for the most part, I see a lot of people like myself who are like, you know, you'll see different people playing in my band from show to show. And like, you know, I'll play in other people's bands if they need something. But like, I don't know. I think it's hard to really make that commitment, and probably for a lot of the reasons we just talked about too.
I was literally just gonna say. I think this ties back to just the fact that the older you get, the more inevitably individualistic you get, because you look out for number one.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you start going through, as soon as you leave college or leave high school, even in a lot of cases, you inevitably are tapped into the bill cycle. It's like, what am I having to pay for on a monthly basis? Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's car insurance, maybe it's phone, internet, rent, whatever. As you kind of go on, you accumulate more bills. And as that happens in your mid to late 20s and even early 30s and mid 30s, you're still in that phase of your life where you're not like, in most cases, making a lot of money. Like, you're scraping by in most cases. So in that, I mean, even the people I know that I consider myself in like a successful grouping of people just from like my work personally, and like I have people that care about what I do and all that. But even with my own my life and me and my wife live in an apartment. It's a small apartment. It's a nice town. We're not like breaking the bank. Like I'm not putting away thousands of dollars every month. You know what I mean? To actually accumulate to a level where I can feel fine about taking a day off or a vacation or doing something leisurely or investing in an album, right? Like these are things that even I can't do, and I do feel like I'm successful. So I think there's like that age bracket where the older you get into your 20s and 30s, you're still sort of poor, even if you are successful, unless again, exceptions. Of course, there's people that just get right into real estate or they become a doctor out of college. Forget that. Like those people are the exception. I get that. That's fine. But regarding this, I mean, think about like in high school or even like pre-high school, when you're young like that, it's cool to be a musician. Like all your friends want to support you. It's like, oh, you're gonna be a rock star. Like girls, like if you're a guy, like girls love it. It's like, oh, he's a musician, and it's like the meme. But then you're like 26 as a musician, and girls are like, oh, he's a musician. Like I know that he's gonna like be wasting all his time and money on music and not being a success or whatever. So I definitely think that hyper individualism plays in to why it's so difficult to create a support system, because the people our age, they are just invested in their own life. They're trying to save money. They're trying to find work. They're trying to be successful in their own right. Whereas if you keep tracking younger into like the early 20s, the late teens, these are people who still have that, like you're saying, that hopeful optimism, and they want to get involved in a bunch of projects because they're just getting their toes wet. So it's a lot easier to get commitment from younger people who are just like, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, versus in your late 20s, you're already getting that adulthood cynicism of just, I got to make rent this month. I don't have time to go out to so-and-so's show in Philly or invest time marketing this product or like promoting this band. You know? So.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the first 2 records that I did, I paid for them myself, which I couldn't do again. Like, I did the first one, I was living with my parents, and I was doing a long-term sub job at Great Valley, and before that Stetson, which are both, like, in the Westchester School District, Great Valley School District. They both, nowhere are you being rich as a teacher, but, like, especially living at home, that was good. I definitely had enough money to put a couple $1,000s into albums then. But I can't do that anymore. Like, I think about that, like, looking forward, I'm like, I don't know how I would possibly save. And the other issue, you want to spend more money each time because you realize the things that didn't go as well.
Yep. Yeah, of course. You up the ante with production. Of course. Yeah.
And then on the other side, it's like, there's this saying that you're supposed to, I guess it's not really a saying, but like a tip to spend as much money marketing your album as you spend on producing it. I'm just
it's like 50% because you have to get people to listen to it.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I didn't do that in the first one. So you're telling me that record that wasn't even good enough that I need to spend more on to make it better. I also have to double the amount of money that I spent. But now I can't. Like, I can't even afford the first part.
Yeah.
So, which is where like Kickstarter and those things can be helpful, but
it still
it's a
sucks.
lot of work.
It's still and exactly. Even doing a crowdfunding type product is still in and of itself a job because you have to be shoving that in people's faces all the time. You're constantly emailing, texting. You're like, hey, please. You're basically maybe not in the literal sense begging, but you are begging. Like you might be like, hey man, it's been a while. Like just messaging some random friend. Like I hope you're doing well. I'm doing a Kickstarter, please support me. Maybe it's not like literal begging, but it is kind of you begging. Like, hey, you're essentially saying, I need help, and I can't afford to do this on my own, and I'm reaching out to whoever I can reach out to. And it does suck, because I'm the same. I was the same as you. I literally, the albums, all the albums I produced while I was living with my parents, and I could never invest what I invested into those albums as someone who's living on my own now. I can't even imagine a time in the future where I would be able to.
Yeah.
Because it's like, again, like I want to have kids. You know what I mean? Like I want to be an actual adult at some point, and just the thought of at this point investing thousands of dollars into a project that's completely, at this point in my life at least, self-fulfilling. Like it's not like I'm trying to become a famous musician or whatever. So it's all for me ultimately. Even if I'm like, oh, it's all I want to share the songs. Like there is that part of it. Of course, it's like I want to express myself. People like my music. It's fine. I'll share the songs. But ultimately, it's for you. Like we all record for ourselves. Like it's not like this philanthropic endeavor that we're like, oh, we're gracing the world with our music. Like we want to do music, you know what I mean? Like it's like a benefit, an added benefit that people listen to it. So I can't imagine even into the future thinking about investing that type of money, and that sucks. It sucks to think about that.
And that's what also makes me think like, so if you were gonna do it, everything we just talked about, you have to give up, which is possible. Like if you really, really, really wanted to do it, you could move back in with your parents. You could do the Kickstarters and everything and make that like as full time as possible. You could quit your job. Like you can do all these things, and it's definitely possible. But that's where the actual decision comes in of like, is it really worth all that? And for me, the reason I just can't imagine actually saying yes to that, even though I imagined that when I was younger, is you can do all that and not make it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And this might be getting a little pedantic, but I definitely think, again, this kind of goes back to the concept that you have to, at some point in your life as an artist of any level, be able to look realistically at your situation and compare yourself to other people if you're trying to invest that level of financial security into what you're doing. Like, it's totally different if you're just doing it as a passion, hobby, and it's not draining your bank account. Do art forever. That's fine. Like, who cares? But if it has, like, actual financial repercussions, and not just financial, but, like, emotional health repercussions, like, all these things factor into your identity as a person. Like, the longer you pursue a craft as hardcore as you are in music theoretically here, it's going to have an effect on you as an adult. Like, we've all seen the 60-year-old dad with like the old looking Fender and his gross amp at a bar rocking out, and like, in a lot of cases, I think that's a beautiful thing. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with expressing yourself in older age. There's absolutely, I think it's awesome that people can do that, but there's always that guy, and you look at that guy, and I've known many people like this. I've known them personally. I've talked to them. They still think they're going to make it. I literally know men in their 40s and 50s that play these bars, and they're doing it, talking to me and talking to the people at the bar, like, recording this new record, like, it's gonna be the one, like, I'm talking to this manager, he was the ex-manager for Tool, or like Black Sabbath, like, he's helping us out, he's actually like the guy that Black Sabbath's like cousin or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they're still speaking about it in a way that's consuming their identity. And again, if it's in a healthy way, if it's just a hobby, whatever, that's fine. But if it's like consuming all your being, and the older you get, it just becomes really difficult, I think, to realistically be able to look inward and be like, what does this thing that I'm doing mean to me? Like, how do I place this on the map? Because it really does become more and more difficult to to manage that balance, I think, as you get older, you know?
Yeah. And I think to some degree, I look at those older people too, and I admire that, even though I do think it's silly to be like 55 thinking I'm still going to make it because it's this next record or whatever, and you've been trying for 25 years or something. To some degree, it's silly. To some degree, I'm just like, wow, like you really have that much passion for it,
Right,
you know?
right.
And I think about myself, and people have told me, like, when they see me perform and things, that they can just, like, feel the passion. Like, that's, like, I think the number one compliment that I've gotten that I appreciate the most and that I get the most is that it's passionate.
Yeah, you have
like,
a great stage presence.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But then I think, though, like, am I really passionate enough that I could be like that guy, that I would still be? And I really don't think so. Because also, if I was really that passionate, I would be playing much more frequently than I am right now. And by playing, I just mean practicing, not even just, like, live. But, like, I would be at home working on songwriting at least, because that's the thing I like the most, and singing. Like, I would be working on that every day, or at least close to every day, if I really was that driven. But, you know, maybe I could be if I wasn't teaching and doing other things. But, like, I do have other passions.
Yeah.
Like, I do like thinking about my job when I'm not there. I do like thinking about what I'm going to be able to do this year to make the kids' lives better and get them better at math. And, you know, all that's, I have that passion for other things too, and from personal relationships. So it's like, you know, I think part of me is, realistic that maybe I'm just not at that level. But part of me is also like, I don't know if you really have the passion to put yourself at that level, because that takes a lot.
Yeah. You're too logical, man. You're too logical to be a famous artist. Almost literally, I mean in the sense where the same traits, almost the same traits that create that older person that's in their 60s or whatever, still rocking out, believing they're going to make it. The same traits that make that person are the ones that make, like, a Prince or a David Bowie.
Yeah.
Like, you almost have to, in order to reach that level of fame or whatever, you in almost all cases, not all cases, you have to be almost disillusioned with yourself at your own talent. Like, you have to, like, viciously believe that you are something special and that you're unique. And it almost gets to the point where being, like, self-analytical or whatever works in reverse. It almost harms you more to get to that level, because you have to, and this is the whole concept of, like, the climbing the ladder, you know what I mean? Like the corporate ladder, even. Like, you can parallel this to just business life in general, or the industry of business versus musicianship or artistry, because it works the same way. Like, everybody who's been in music long enough has horror stories about people they were friends with. That friend got picked up by a manager. They moved to LA or whatever, and it just changed them. And they're not the same anymore. Now they're a bad person. They're a douche. They're very temperamental. They don't keep up with their relationships. All they care about is hanging out or hanging around people that are more successful than them, so they can step on them. And everybody has that story. Everybody knows at least one person, if you're a musician or an artist, who's in that space, who, like, someone got elevated to that next level and it changed them forever as a person. And I really think, I mean, again, we're speaking in sort of probability here. Like, it's not like this is an all people thing, but I think most people who reach those insane levels of success, like, you have to be disillusioned with yourself. Like, you have to shove your ego through the door to believe in yourself that hard to make something happen. Because if you don't, if you're constantly, like, self-doubting and being hypercritical of everything, like, it's not that it's impossible to make it. Like, there's plenty of artists who are super hypercritical of themselves and all that, but it's just a lot more difficult to build, like, to get off the ground with that attitude. Like, there's artists who are already successful and they have that attitude, so that it's like they almost have the privilege of being self-critical because they already have a following and all that built in. But if you're someone starting out and you have that attitude, like, you are being a realist. Like, I'm an adult, I'm trying to figure stuff out. Wait, I'm passionate about this. How can I be passionate about that too? Like, you're already weighing these things. You've already lost half the battle, because now you're out of that headspace of, like, being full of yourself, you know, which you almost need to be, like, to get to that level. Yeah.
I mean, I think of, like, Adam Levine told his grandmother, I heard this. I mean, Adam Levine didn't tell me himself, but he told me, or no, he didn't tell me. He told his grandmother.
I was just choked on my water.
He told his grandmother, like, he was going to be a star.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, all right. Like, and I think about that, a guy like Adam Levine, who you hear that story now and you're just like, wow, that's so cool that he just knew. Because he is, like, one of the biggest people in music.
Ever, yeah.
But if he had failed, he would be that same guy. You're like, what is this guy's problem? He's so arrogant.
Exactly.
You know, so it really is wild. The other thing I was thinking about when you said, like, trying to take those risks to get to the next level and get to the next level. When you're a musician, all of the bottom levels have no money. But when you're in business, like, you have a job.
Yeah, you're building. Like, you're creating building blocks to, like, the next phase of your career or whatever.
But while you're getting a paycheck. Like, if my goal in teaching was to become, like, a superintendent or something, right? I got a lot of steps to climb to get there. But while I'm climbing, they're paying me to teach.
Yeah, right.
You know? I'm doing well enough. Could I be doing better financially? Absolutely. Again, we're 26. Like, what do you expect? We're millennials. We have to complain about our money. You know? Yep. And nobody's going to pay us because we have no experience.
Yep.
But seriously, like, that's the difference, and that's the risk reward. It's like, I'm not going to risk everything to not get paid for a decade and then put in thousands of dollars. Whereas with teaching, I put in the money in college. I don't have to continue to invest tons of money into being a teacher. It's not like I have to pay the school to let me teach for a year.
Right.
They're going to pay me, you know, and I'm going to keep trying to get better. But even if I don't do a great job or I make a mistake, I'm going to get paid. Where, you know, music, it's if the record's not good, I mean, even if it is good, they're probably not going to pay for it. So why would they if it's bad?
Yeah, exactly. Everything's streaming now. It's like the Gillian Welch song. Everything is free now. Do you know that song?
Yeah.
So good. It's so sad though. I mean, it's literally prophetic. I mean, it's horrible how it is, and yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough looking at all this stuff rationally because when you look at the landscape of musicians who are even just in our area as like a micro example. I mean, there's a lot of talented people out there and. They're our age. In a lot of cases, they're older than us, and they're putting the hours in, the hustle. But like you said, I mean, I think there's a point where you realize that, hey, you know what? Technically speaking, like I could increase the probability of me getting successful if I quit my job, if I just put everything into this. But without the infrastructure there, it just seems like such a bad bet. Like if you were a betting person, it just seems like the worst bet ever because I mean, it'd be so different if there were 100 times the amount of bars and restaurants and promotional companies that were booking local musicians to pay them. Like if there were things in place that you could actually go to these bars and do like a tryout thing and be like, hey, like I'm going to try out to play here every Tuesday night, or I'm going to try out to be part of this open mic or this songwriter showcase, whatever it is. You could, if there was more structures like that in place and you knew going into it, each of these things guaranteed you a certain amount of money, there'd be so many more people lining up to be passionate and to pursue music, I think, because you can look at it, like you said, there's a trail towards success. It's like, even if I don't make it, at least I'm making a little bit of money. Like, it's not like you'd be making $30,000 or $40,000 a year, but you'd at least be making enough to scrape by, maybe to like work a part-time job or something to help support like what you were doing. But the way it's laid out now, like especially as an adult, like I said, unless you have a lot of luck and you come from either a privileged background like I do, or you come from a super educated background where you have like other things to fall back on, you know, or if you're like just a trust fund kid, like without those safety nets, I mean, it's really tough for anybody, even the youngest people, to look logically at the situation and be like, oh yeah, that seems like a good bet. Which is why, like I'm saying, you must have to be disillusioned to the fact of like, I'm gonna make it, because when you look at the actual factors involved, almost everything is working against you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, and for the record, when you're talking about making it, I'm not even like, when I say making it, I don't even mean like the level of 21 Pilots or something. Would that be cool? Oh, absolutely. That's the dream, right? To play sold out stadiums for people who absolutely adore you and like tell you how much their music means to them. Like, but I mean, even just like making $40,000 a year.
Yeah, just getting by. Like just that like upper like moderate level where you're able to put out like an album a year and to play shows where people come to, have tours booked for you, have merch, like just being at that like entry level of success is still so unattainable.
Even if it was just like, so I'm getting to a point where I feel like it doesn't make sense to play more than maybe 4 shows a year. In the same, like within this area.
Yeah.
Right. So even if one thing was changed where all of those shows were packed, you know, and people like knew all the songs and everything, then like that's great for me. Like I'd be good right there. But instead it's like, I feel the thing that's the hardest for me is I feel like I am begging people to come to shows who are respectful and loving and caring and supportive, but I don't even really know if they all necessarily really enjoy being there.
Like you mean it's like a friend thing where like, they just care about you and yeah.
And I do think some of my friends have told me, and they're honest people, and I know it's the truth, that some of my songs have really meant a lot to them, and that's almost enough in itself to just do it, like to do another record. Which I'm saying all of this, and I do really feel like I'm going to do another one. Like, I really...
It's still like the fire, like the embers are still there.
Yeah, there's this small, like... There's this small thing there that's just like, you can do it better. Mm-hmm. You can take the next step and make it, and be really, really proud of a record. I do feel like that's there, but... That's the insane part of you that has to be there to do it.
Right. And also on top of that, I think to kind of just speak to the maybe like disenchantment you're feeling right now, because I've been there. I think part of it is that your outward life and brand, whatever you want to call it, like your public image on social media plus your relationships in real life, they obviously are a projection of what's going on inside, like internally. And if you're struggling with this stuff internally, you might not even realize it, but that is bleeding into reality. Like even just take this as an example. I don't even know how true this is because I don't follow people that closely on social media, even my friends and family. I'm not on Facebook too often or whatever because it's like my job. Yeah. So it's like I try not to be on social media in my free time. But I could even point to this example, and you can let me know if it's true. I mean, I would imagine, say 3 or 4 years ago when you were like hype and you were really like on fire to get into this, the amount of times that you would post about it on social media and the amount of people you would talk to about it and just the energy you had about it was a lot different than right now. You know what I mean? Like you probably post less, you probably talk to people about it less, and the way you post and talk about it is probably, again, slightly, even if it's only slightly, just a little bit less energetic maybe. You know what I mean? Because like people attach a narrative to whatever they're doing in life. Like I think half the reason people would come to a show like yours, where it's like the shows you did for Brad, or the shows I've done that were like from a Kickstarter project or whatever, people want to feel attached to the thing that they're attending. Like if they're gonna be part of something, they want to feel like it's not just another show. You know what I mean? Like it needs to be some kind of special event, like something that's purpose-driven, that is a reason for them to get off their couch on a Saturday night instead of watching Netflix. And I think that's the other difficult thing about being a musician in general is maintaining that energy for the people that are listening, as on social media, in real life, like making it a constant projection of who you are, which is like it comes back to the identity crisis. Because without that, you're essentially just like, hey guys, I'm putting a new album out. I'm stoked about the songs. Please come out to my show. And that's just not as appealing as like you being like balls to the walls. This is everything to me. Yeah. Please come out. You know what I mean? Like it's just that. And I don't know. Maybe you can speak to that. I don't know if it's the case, but like that's how I got as I dwindled out of my songwriting for sure.
No, I mean I was just thinking about it. You can go on my Instagram, and like I haven't really posted much at all. Like not even.
Like personal stuff, you mean?
Yeah. I posted something because I went to a Switch show, which we were talking about before. Were we even recording then? I don't know.
Yeah, we recorded.
Okay, all right.
That's funny. I just got started. I should really start doing like a 3, 2, 1 or something like that, so it feels more official. I'm just like, what's up, Kevin?
Did we have the headphones on or not when I said that? But yeah, so I just posted about that, which we can go at some point. Actually, I think I might even be able to swing it back around. We'll talk to about that show more. But I posted about that. I posted about. This is my teacher brain right now. I'm like 5 steps ahead. I know the next like 5 paragraphs. It's like when there's something that happens to your community at school and you're like, we got to stop everything, we're talking about this. And you're just on the spot, I've got the speech ready.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, I haven't thought about it. But anyway, so yeah, I posted about that. At the end of the school year, I posted something. But back when I was putting out my first album, The In-Between, which I released in 2017, jeez, it feels like much longer than that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I thought it was like 2016 in my mind.
I think it was March 2017.
Crazy.
I posted almost every day. I did this like, and this is another example of money that I could just spend that. I spent like $1,000 or $2,000 on this social media. It was called a Reboot. Sneak Attack Media. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
You know, I was kind of skeptical, but it was a really good program. It really taught me a lot. But anyway, through the things that I learned from that, I was able to start like branding myself online. And, you know, I scheduled out like when I was going to post stuff, and I was doing it all the time. It was a post a day. And my Instagram was like, started off maybe like I'd get 30 likes or something, to where I got to the point where I was just getting 100 or more likes on everything. And I thought it was really cool. Like you could just see the growth that was happening over the time. That didn't really happen a whole lot with me on Twitter. I think Instagram was the one that I picked that I was like, I get this more.
That makes sense, too, because most people you know in real life are on Instagram and Facebook more than Twitter. Twitter's mostly strangers. It's like hard to build it from the ground up, I think. Yeah,
and from conversations and just from watching your work, like I've seen like how it can be done on Twitter, and it's just not really my like natural go-to.
Yeah.
So anyway, it happened with Instagram, and you know, but now, it has died off so much more, to the point where I also just feel like if I was going to talk about my music right now on Instagram, I don't really know what I would say. Like, I mean, I have a show, I'm playing a show in September at Steel City. So like that's something I'll start posting about soon. But, you know, other than that, it's not like, but back then it was the whole message around the In-Between, and then the whole message around the album that I did for Brad.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I was thinking about in all of this is like, when I said the In-Between was only 2 years ago, so that was a 13-song record. I'd never been in a recording studio before. I had written the songs over like a 3-4 year time period, and I was just kind of like, let's just give this a shot. Like, I was looking at maybe doing an acoustic album just to see what it would be like. But then I was talking with Chris at Chaplin's when I was playing a show. And he was like, well, this is a recording studio now, and we should try things out. And so we like worked on a song together, and I was like, oh, this is sounding real. Like, now I have to do this. You know what I mean? Like, I could actually have a rock album. So we did that, put that out in 2017. That was a ton of work. And then I was driving over here, actually, before I even really realized, when I finally realized this. But Brad, so for those of you listening, Brad was my best friend growing up. He passed away in a accident. It was only really a few months after.
Yeah, it was really
that record
soon.
was out. Which I had it in my head that it was like a year or two after.
Wow.
But it was soon after. And so he was riding his motorcycle. He got hit by a guy in a pickup truck who was drinking and had some other sorts of like drugs in his system. So obviously that was, like, for the rest of my life, that's going to be one of, if not the biggest, like, impactful things that has happened to me.
So defining.
Yeah. And so I had to write a record for him, you know? I was like, what else am I going to do as a musician? Brad was drumming for me. He taught me how to play.
He drummed on the In-Between, right?
Yeah,
right.
So he's recorded there. He played shows with me.
And you said earlier in the podcast, just a reference back for anyone who maybe is listening and forgot, you said that he's the one who essentially got you into music and got you into like the music scene, because he was in the local band that
he taught me how to. Yeah, he was in the Go Around. The Go Around's still going strong. Alex Sadek he moved to Nashville, actually.
Of course.
And I think Anthony might be following him soon. But hopefully Anthony's told people if they're listening to this right now.
It probably won't come up for another month. He's got a month's time.
All right, good. I think we'll be fine then. But yeah, and then Brad taught me how to play guitar. He got me into music. He took me to my first Switchfoot show, which, like, Switchfoot is the band, the thing that keeps me wanting to make music. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for him. So I wrote a 6-song EP for him And
it was like right after.
Yeah.
It was like you literally
Yeah.
just like, you jumped on it right after.
This was insane turnaround. So he passed away on June 2nd, 2017. And when I decided I was going to put out the record, it was like, undoubtedly, it is coming out on June 2nd, 2018. Like, there was just no other way it was going to happen, which set up an incredible timeline. And now I knew how to do things better.
Yeah, because you'd done the record before.
Yeah. But the writing even in itself was insane because, of course, I procrastinated some too. So I had like maybe one song done by, you know, I'm sure Judah would remember this too because he helped me out with a lot of these, but I think it was maybe January.
Okay.
So then like we must have recorded, gosh, it must have been in March or April. So I wrote like 5 more songs in the next 2 months and put them together with a band because the other thing we were going to go into the studio and the drums and bass were getting done. Like, I was like, we are doing this like
a live track, yeah.
Yeah, and way more streamlined than the process had been with the in-between because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And Chris was even like, so I did it at Chaplin's again with Chris, and he was impressed with how quickly we got done the first couple
that's
things.
Insane, especially like pushing the songwriting process off that long and then having to put it together with a band. I mean, it's one thing to even have a song written and trying to get it produced with a band. Another thing to do the writing and then right away be like, all right, band, let's go.
And one of the songs I finished, and we practiced it for an hour. The last song on the album, which I think is a really good song. Like, I love it. We like played it. I mean, I wrote it for a lot longer than an hour, but the band played it for an hour.
Yeah, and then it was like,
to
it was
like
done.
Get their parts.
Yeah.
And I remember Judah looked at me with an hour left in that practice, and I was like, "We have one more," and he was like, "It's not like." He was just like, "Dude, it's not like there's no way we're getting that done in an hour." And I was like, "No, like we're gonna get it done." And he was like, "Okay," you know. And I mean, part of the only reason that it got done in that hour is because Judah's brilliant at what he does, and he's incredible at coming up with really cool sounding parts. So yeah, it got done, and so it was this incredible like emotional thing for me to be writing these songs, and also then the whole time thinking they have to be good enough for Brad. Like, this can't be some crap record.
Right, like you just kind of rushed it, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, my best friend passed away. Like, I'm just going to do some music.
Job. No, it was like, it had to be, because I was also still thinking of it as like potential career moving forward.
Right.
Like, it had to be better than the in-between, and it had to be as good as it could be, because it was for Brad.
Yeah.
And it turned out really good. Like, I think it's a lot better than the in-between, and I'm really proud of it. I still listen to those songs and play those songs, and I think each one of them is better than most of the stuff that was on the in-between.
Yeah.
But that being said, now we're looking at, in the course of maybe a year and a half, all of that work. Of course I'm not. Like, of course I've kind of taken the past year off.
Yeah,
like,
right.
And even after, and I have those, like you were talking about the reasons to come to the show, like the in-between had a theme. That whole album was about being in an in-between place in life, you know, moving from college to first jobs and things was where I was at.
Of course.
The record for Brad, obviously, like the whole community of people who were there supporting each other through this.
Yeah, like friends and family mourning and
which was a huge group of people, because Brad was not just like, he wasn't just a good person. Like, he was a good person who knew as many people as possible. Whenever he met them, he remembered that conversation, and if he saw them 2 years later, he'd bring it up, and those people would be like, "What?" Like, we talked about this, and this at Wawa on Route 3, and you know.
Yeah.
So
I just got goosebumps. I had to it's so like
yeah, it's unbelievable still, and you know, but I had those groups of people coming together for those things, but still after that it was like, you know, I can keep doing this, but I need to take a break. I need to, like, when I get back into it and play those songs, like, that story is always going to be part of it, and Brad's always going to be a reason why I play. But yeah, I just kind of think, looking at it now, I'm like, of course you're taking a break.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's almost like it worked both ways for you. Like, it almost worked as a cathartic passion project in a way where it's like you said, it's bringing a community of people together, and it's for your best friend. And there's all this purpose locked into it. At the same time, it worked as a emotional traumatic drain, because this isn't just like some I'm gonna write about this thing in my life and it's just me expressing myself. Like, this is your best friend that tragically passed away as a young adult. I mean, there's nothing. It's not like a bright and happy story. Like, this is something that as you're processing it in such a short turnaround too. I mean, just like you said, just to reiterate that. I mean, you put out an album, your first album, with him, recording with him. 4 months later, he tragically passes away, and right away you're like, I'm going to produce another album, and it's going to be about him. I mean, that's like packing all of that trauma and that like just the processing that goes with something like that is insane. And on there's that level of it, but then again there's the level of purpose-driven nature that is inevitably attached to it. I mean, like, whether it's conscious or unconscious, I mean, of course, like you said, it's bringing people together. He's a great guy. Everybody knew it. So it was like an easy way. Like, people were like inspired to come together for that. And which is amazing. But then also, like, when that's over, like when you put that like when you close the chapter, right? Yeah. That's like, again, it's in part a sigh of relief. It's also in part like this dump of energy, because you just put the past essentially 2 years of your life into this thing, and now it's over. So now what, right? Now you're this whole time you've been working a job, you've been dating your girlfriend, you've moved out. You're like, your life has essentially moved on, but you don't have the same. Again, not trying. It sounds weird contextualizing it this way. I'm not trying to say like his death was like a purpose that you know what I'm trying to say. But like, it added this element to your life where it was like, I'm gonna make something of this for my best friend, and that inevitably is a driving factor of your passion and what you were doing. So having that be gone, having that chapter closed, I'm sure was like, again, a sigh of relief, and also just like, what next? Like, what now? Like, what do I do moving forward?
I remember even the feeling at that release show for that record, which you were at, right? Yeah. I remember.
It was so good. Well, literally like a flawless. That was a crazy performance. It's nuts.
It was. Yeah, I remember. So I did all the talking at the beginning because I knew, like, when I got to those songs, I wasn't gonna be able to talk about them yet. Yeah. There were lines in those songs that still, when I play them, I like will tear up while I'm singing them. So yeah, we did. I mean, and that night, even really, it's just a good summary of this whole conversation. So I did all this talking about what happened and what I was doing. We played a bunch of songs from the In Between, and then there was that, which this will get me. Remember, I was 5 paragraphs ahead. This is going to get me to the next thing too.
Teacher brain.
We played that clip, which I'll explain after I finish this thought, and then the whole Friendship EP. And I remember afterward, like, talking to everybody, and then, there's this image of, like, rock stars after shows that got our party and, do all this stuff and, like, drink and everything. I went home and I was just, like, I was zapped, because it was, as much as that was, like, an incredible night, it was, like, that's the point of it. Like, that night was the point of it. For us all to be there a year after Brad died, in the same room, or at least, like, if people couldn't make it, like, talking that whole day.
It was a memoriam, literally. Yeah.
And when it was over, it was like, that's what all the work was for the past. Even I would say the work that I did with Brad as a musician, all of it was for that moment, to have that purpose that night. And when it was over, it was like, I didn't need to play another show, even though I have. It was just like, that was the purpose of all of that work. So the clip from In Between. So I'm going to tell this story, and I still just don't even believe it. So I don't know if I've described strong enough first that I love Switchfoot. Like, I love them. I'm not even Christian. I know they have a lot of Christian, like,
I was going to ask,
and everything.
Just in general for people listening.
And when people hear Switchfoot, they think Christian rock band.
They're just a good band.
Yeah. And they even have said many times they're not a Christian rock band. They're all Christians, and you can see, when you think about the writing, the Christian aspects of the songs. But I would argue that every single song that has a Christian or God-related thing, you could easily translate to something else.
Of course, yeah. Unless it's, like, really the corny, overt, like, old school worship music that just
Right.
like is really just over the top. Like most songs, yeah, you can just swap in meaning for words. It's just
And I know that that's intentional from John too, and I like that's why I can still love them and not be Christian. Like love their music,
right,
not the
John Foreman, if you're listening to this.
I love many Christians. That is nothing. That's not what I was trying to say.
That's so funny.
But like, I can still love their music
Of course,
because it's not overtly a religious thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of their songs, and you hear this from John's interviews too. They go from dark, broken places to writing songs of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the pain of whatever is going on in life, and they make it hopeful.
Dude, The Cure for Pain, John Foreman solo song, so good. Sorry, just
amazing.
Just hit me, yeah.
Or like, do you know The Shadow Proves the Sunshine?
No, I don't think I know that one.
It's a Switchfoot song. They don't play a whole lot anymore, but just that even line, The Shadow Proves the Sunshine.
It's a great line. Yeah,
So it's gotten, again, I was like 16 or so when I started listening to them with Brad, and seen them like double-digit times. So we went, a couple days after Brad passed, like we were listening to one of Switchfoot's songs called Live It Well, and it was recently released at that time. And the messages were just like, part of the lines are, life is short, I want to live it well. And it's like, it was just the perfect song for that moment because Brad's life was cut short and he lived every moment of it well. Like there were things that it's like, it seemed like he wasn't thinking about 30 years from now because he just wanted right now to be great. And not even in the way of like he went and did ridiculous
like
danger. Yeah, it wasn't like that. It was more
just
like, I'm going to go way out of my way to make this person happy right now. And friends, family, acquaintances. That's how it was. So I tweeted at John Foreman and asked him to write those lyrics because I wanted to get a tattoo of it. I'd seen he had done this before. He handwrites stuff and people get tattoos of it. So I have it now.
I was looking at it. It's cool.
He tweeted back like less than a day. My phone was blowing up. Like I turned off Twitter notifications after this. So I knew like, I think went to the bathroom, came back, like was about to get back into bed and saw my phone. Like you could like scroll for days with these messages. So I was like, oh, like I just started crying immediately. And then I opened it and realized he wrote back to me and was like, so sorry for your loss. Like, And so I got the tattoo. That summer, I think it was August. Is today August 7th?
Yes.
I think it was 2 years ago today.
Wow. Okay.
We went to a Switchfoot show, and some of mutual friends through Brad that I have tweeted at John Foreman. I didn't even know this. Tweeted at John Foreman and said like that we were going to be at the show. Sent him a picture of my tattoo, and so they played "Live It Well" that day and dedicated it to Brad. I still remember the feeling I had when he said like.
And you didn't know. So
I had no idea he was going to do this. So I'm like up towards the front listening and like it gets real quiet and he starts playing the acoustic guitar and he's like, I was reading online and I just knew. Just from at that point, I just knew. He said, I'm reading online about how this next song has like meant a lot to some people who are, dealing with the tragic loss of a friend. So this one's for Brad. Which... like, I hope, whatever you believe in afterlife and everything, I hope Brad saw that because he would have just pooped himself. Like, John Foreman dedicating a song to him,
Yeah.
And then later in the song, it got to a point where like it quieted it back down. It was like the bridge. And he's like, so Brad's friends, where are you all at? We were kind of all over the place. Oh, you're all over the place. And I had a cutoff shirt. I put my arm up, and again, I'm in the front. So he sees my tattoo. It's like on the inner, like my right bicep, I guess, if I have biceps. And he goes, oh, is that the tattoo? And I like yell, yes. And he goes, looks great, man. What's your name? I go, I'm Kevin. And he tells everyone to say hi to me. And he comes down off the stage and gives me a hug. And I'm like holding back tears right now. I just like still can't believe it was such a like, I don't know, seemingly simple thing for him to do, but like that moment, even by itself, helped me get through this.
Yeah, that's some like powerful kindness,
Yeah.
that he didn't have to do, that no one has to do. Yeah.
And that's what that band's all about.
Yeah.
And when I feel inspired again to write, like that's why. Because if I could do that, like that literally changed my life. And,
yeah.
And it's unbelievable. But luckily that whole show got recorded. So I have the audio of that too, which is another, like, of all the shows they're going to record.
Yeah.
I got this one. Like, it's not just phone audio. We got actually.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And, so I took the clip of him saying that stuff and put that was the thing in between.
Yeah, at the show. Yeah.
Then, so I always think that it's like, okay, that's like wrapped up. That's the end of the story, right? So we go to the show a couple days ago, and we got, my parents were very nice, got us box seats at the Fillmore, like VIP seats. So we were like up top, and I'm thinking, we're not, there's not going to be another interaction, right? He doesn't have to dedicate this song to somebody anymore. He did that. Like, he doesn't have to, like, do anything wild like that. It's just going to be a regular Switchfoot show, which is like amazing as it is.
Yeah,
it's life-changing as it is. So we're up in the box, and so I'm really thinking, like, I'm not close to the stage to like give this guy a high five or something. But John's an elusive front man. Like, he gets off stage and does some crazy stuff. So he's walking out into the crowd and then just walks right over to where we are and climbs up the thing. Like, climbs up the, whatever you call it.
The box thing.
Up the balcony.
Yeah.
And he's right there in front of me. And I'm like, this is, you got to be kidding me. So I, like, give my phone to Christy. She's taking pictures. And he's singing, like, hanging off this ledge. And then he turns around, and I'm like, hey, John. I show him the tattoo again just to see if it'll maybe, jog his memory or whatever. And I was like, it's really nice to see you again. And he's like, it's good to see you, too. And I'm just, like, looking directly in his eyes, too, again, of, like, my hero.
Yeah.
Like, and just that moment, having that moment where of, like, you have changed my life in so many positive ways. And you just happen to climb up here. Like, I know he couldn't have even seen me if he would have recognized me, which I'm sure he didn't.
Yeah.
He climbed up right there. Like, what are the chances?
Yeah, it's powerful.
He took my Switchfoot Bro-Am hat, which Brad and I went to California to see this show that they do on the beach. And we got that hat there, so it means a lot to me. He took that hat and wore it. And he's like, singing and stuff. And then people are like, so there's a tension brought to me because of this, too, because, we gave each other, like a high five or whatever. And people were videotaping because he's climbing up this thing. So after the show, I'm seeing on Twitter all these videos, and I, like, bumped into a couple people who had taken them at the show, and then it gives me this opportunity to talk about Brad again.
Yeah, right.
Which you asked me before if it was, like, an okay thing to talk about. I love talking about him. It's obviously it's emotional, but especially stuff like that too at a Switchfoot show, like, just to get a chance to, like, share how good of a person Brad was, and how good of a people Switchfoot are.
Well, and it speaks to their messaging, like you've been saying, that the message of, like, hope that they bring, and it's that I think brings this whole just eternally mysterious concept of death that we all struggle with. No one understands. It's just the eternal mystery, and we grapple with it because it seems like it's permanent and it's awful, and we don't know how to process it. And that attitude essentially looks at death and it treats it. It does the process, like you said, like a song by Switchfoot or John Foreman or whatever. It'll start with the grief and with the loss and all that, and then it rises up into hope and celebration in some way. And the messaging, like you're saying, how kind of like the Christian parallel, whatever, how you can kind of swap in whatever. I think it's beautiful in that way because it is so universally relatable in the sense where death, I mean, it's such a huge topic. I mean, it's like, how do you even start? But I mean, people come at it so differently, and you, depending on the person who died, depending on the people who surround the person who died in the aftermath, like, there's so many factors that factor into how you process death and what death feels like to someone. Like, there's people obviously who growing up, maybe they had like an abusive dad, and then that dad dies. You know what I mean? And that like that impact of death is such like a different, violent, just horrible like pit creating feeling for them forever, maybe. And then there's situations where someone lives till 90 years old and they pass away, and then it's just like, oh well, they lived a great life, like they're in a better place maybe, or whatever it is. And what I'm getting at is just this idea that, you know, when someone dies, it's always tragic, no matter what, or no matter if they're old, young. Obviously, it's more tragic when they're young because of the experience of life and all that. But at some point, the hope and the ideal circumstance, again, just reiterate ideal circumstance, because not every person is perfect, not every situation is perfect, but the hope is that the people surrounding that person who we lost reach that point of being able to celebrate their life, right? Because it's like they're gone, so it's like, what would they want you to do? You know, this is like the whole thing with people who are married for years, like 20, 30, 40 years, spouse dies, and it's like 10, 15, sometimes forever. Maybe they never get remarried, but in a lot of cases, it takes 10 and 15 years. There's grief, there's mourning, it's like identity crisis. What am I doing with my life? And then they eventually make the decision to look for happiness again. They look to get in another relationship because they come to that point of being like, I need to celebrate this loved one's life and what they meant to me and others, and they would want me to be happy. Like they would want me to celebrate them and to keep going, because like that's what life is. Like it doesn't stop. Like, and it's horrible. Like it's like, I can't even like reiterate this enough for anyone. I've had multiple friends of mine commit suicide or die from ODs, car accidents. Like it's the worst thing ever. Not trying to downplay it whatsoever, but there's just this thing that happens to every person where you make that decision, and some people, depending on the trauma, depending on the circumstance, it might define them for the rest of their lives in this horrible way, and they can never get past that bump in their mind of just like, how do I process death now? And that's horrible. But the hope, I think, in death, in what you're trying to get at with all this, with creating the album, with having this memoriam dedicated to this great person, bringing people together repeatedly over time, like because of it, and then having this experience with John Foreman, it's such like a beautiful representation of that celebration of this great person's life, which I think is the hope in death. It's like, nothing is forever. Like you and I are going to die. Mm-hmm. Every person, the world's going to die. Every animal's going to die. All life dies. This is just the site. This is what we. This is what life does. Like life dies, and then new life comes, and it's horrible because it's impossible to process that because we don't have an understanding of an afterlife or whatever. Yeah. But it's like, what do you do with that? Like if your pet dies, it's the worst thing ever, right? But it's like, what do you do with that? Yeah. Your pet's gone. Like it's like you can choose to be traumatized and just distraught forever. But I mean, at some point, the hope is that you get to the point where you can get another pet, right? Yeah. Or at least that you can move on. Maybe you don't get another pet, but maybe you're just like, it's so bad that happened, but like it happened, and while I had that pet, it was amazing. Like we had great times together. Like you just celebrate it, you know? And that's what's so great about just the story that you unfold within this tragedy, because it's not a situation like so many people's unfortunate situations are, where it's just the tragedy is embroidered with just horrible circumstances and there's no hope to be found. But you found the hope, you know what I mean? Like the friends and family of Brad found the hope in this, which is just such an important message. Like even just going back to correlate it with like this whole concept of you wanting to be a songwriter as a career, and then wrestling with this like idea of having an identity around it and pursuing it as like the main goal of your life, and how you don't know if to be a realist or an idealist, like how to balance your work-life balance or work-passion balance. It's like it works the same way. It's like keeping that optimism, keeping that hope kind of like as a like an anchor, or not a terrible example, not as an anchor, as something that keeps you buoyant, right? As like a life jacket almost. Like it's like you can
anti-anchor.
Yeah, exactly. Anti-anchor. You can have all the layers of like doubt and self-criticism and cynicism and nihilism or whatever it might be layered on. Well, I guess not nihilism. That's the opposite of hope. But I mean, have these layers on top, as long as there's some kind of life jacket that's, you know, keeping you bobbing on the surface. Because I mean, life, it doesn't slow down, right? Like tragedy doesn't stop. Like the older you get, more people are going to die. More people are going to get divorced. More people are going to lose their jobs, get sick. Like horrible things happen all the time, and you learn to deal with it. And even the people who are going, like, this is like the beautiful thing about, not the beautiful thing, if there is a beautiful redeeming thing about people who are in those like mortality phases of life, whether maybe they got cancer or like there's something that's just they know it's gonna like lead them to the end of their life. Maybe they're just in their last moments. Like, it's beautiful when those people can take that just horrible energy of like coming to the end and then just reach that acceptance point. It's almost like a Buddhist thing, you know, where it's just like you reach the point of oneness where you're like, I let it all go. Like, I had life. Like, I had a great life. I'm in this moment right now. I'm thankful. Like, you just kind of get to that point, you know? And that's like the hope we all have, that we all seek to have, which is like when that moment comes or whatever it is, that we can just like be one with it, because we don't know how we're going to go. Like, we don't know if we get to choose it or not, but you hope that like wherever you're at in life, there's like a peace that comes with the loss, you know?
Yeah. And it's like, I think with the way John writes, he like tries to get to that place before the song's done. And I feel like that's really, really hard. And I try to do that with Brad's record too, of forcing myself to think like, I'm not going to write a 6-song record that's sad. Like I said, the point was to celebrate his life. So trying to like force myself at hyperspeed to come to that point of acceptance so that I could write, which I would say Alex Cardillo, who's been playing in my band for a while and worked on that record a lot and was also good friends with Brad, he described it well. He said there's 3.5 happy songs on this record, a really sad one, and then it's like towards acceptance. But the happy ones, because I was like, let's celebrate the early, you know? We were friends for a long time. Let's celebrate being kids and like, you know, getting off the bus, and, you know, we used to play like baseball with a tennis ball and a wiffle ball bat in his like in the driveway behind his house, and we would hit it up on other people's decks and have to like climb up and get the ball. It was like stuff like that that's what I want to talk about on the record. I didn't want to just like whine about how he died for 6 songs.
Or just be bogged with despair, like you're saying. You don't want it to just like to tip the. You don't want the scales to tip either way. You don't want it to be just like pure optimism and like it's all about the goodness, right? 'Cause it's not, right?
Yeah,
it's that mix, right?
Yeah, and I still like am just so thankful that Brad did such a good job in his relationships with people before he died, that after he died, all of those relationships came together to make the hope of this. I wouldn't even know my girlfriend if it wasn't for him, which that was another, like, coming to that realization was a whole nother, like...
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's, like, permanently embedded into that relationship.
Yeah. And the way it's going, I don't see that relationship ending either, so it's, like, it's just wild.
Yeah.
You know? And so many other close friends that... Or friends that, like, I wasn't close with, but after he passed away, we got so much closer. And, like, it's almost like Brad put all the pieces in place for us to get over it when he was living.
Yeah.
Which, you know, obviously, I don't know, he didn't know, but it's just the way he lived his life set up things to be okay.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing, which is like what I was just kind of trying to stumbling to get the words to say. I mean, it's amazing in the sense that you had that opportunity, because that's such a it's what in all of like the archetypal literature, like if you look through all the religions, you know what I mean, and like in the great literature on death and all that, like that is the sort of hopeful side throughout history, you know what I mean? Like if you're gonna have a worldview or an outlook based around the concept of death, I mean, that's the one you want, right? Like that's the one you want to point to as being this hopeful narrative that you can literally go through that arc where it's like you hit rock bottom right in the beginning. It's rock bottom, and you go through that arc of processing it and just like living through it. Like you can't skip it, right? Like you can't skip the trauma. You can't skip the mourning and then just like the pit in your stomach that you feel for days and weeks and months and sometimes years. Like you can't skip that period. But then eventually, like the arc comes, and you get to that point where you start to remember those good times. Like you remember the times where you're playing with with the wiffle ball and the tennis ball, and like these things start to flood your memory and your perspective. And a lot of that, again, it kind of parallels with I don't want to use the word privileges, but like it sort of parallels with where you're at in life, right? I mean, like if you're in a sunken place in life. Like maybe you're in a bad relationship, or you're in like just a bad job, whatever it might be, and your circumstances aren't great, your health is bad. It's very hard to get to that hopeful place because you're already like weighed down by life. You know what I mean? So it's good to have, it's part of it's a roll of the dice, but part of it's, also just like it's great to build your life to the point, like you're saying, where you've been focusing so much, you focus so much on the work, on the music itself, and now on you as a person and like your actual job and your relationship with your girlfriend now. And it's like, in doing so, you're doing him a service. You know what I mean? By sewing into you. That's what you're doing in a way. Like it's paying off to his memory in the sense that it's like you are living your life to the fullest. You're fulfilling the person you're meant to be, and that does exactly the thing that he would have wanted you to do. So it's like, wow, like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, it works. That's like the ideal, if there is. Again, it's so weird talking about this stuff because none of it's ideal, right? Like I hate the verbiage around it. 'Cause I'm not trying to be like he died, but. You know what I mean? Like, but it kind of inevitably sounds like that when you're trying to create these like narrative arcs around the topic, and it's crazy difficult topic to talk about.
Yes, I mean, obviously, if he was still alive, that would be better. But like, you can't control. Like, I can't control that guy making terrible decisions to kill my best friend. Like, I can't control that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you gotta. And again, if Brad had never introduced Switchfoot into my life, would I be as like optimistic in bad situations? I don't think so. And I'm not always an optimistic person.
Of course, but, no one is. Hopefully, no one is.
But I do think that I'm happier than average, and it's obviously not because I'm making a lot of money. It's not because I have a lot of like things. I have privileges. I have privileges, but I think a lot of it has to do with mindsets like that.
Yeah.
And I think I was never really a tattoo person, but I knew that getting this "Life is short, live it well" on my arm, it's that reminder too of like I'm never going to forget Brad, but there's a point where you stop thinking about him every hour of every day.
Yes, and that's what I was trying to get at. Exactly.
And I'm there. I think about him. Maybe not even every day, but probably still close to every day.
Yeah.
But there's still plenty of times when you're all in on something else that you're doing, and that's when you need the reminder. Like when I'm all in at school and there's something frustrating going on, because you want your kids to be perfect, because like I love the crap out of every one of them. I want them to be perfect because I just care so much about them that I want them to see every success they possibly can.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, and can you please like grow up and change this crappy world and country that we have right now? The frustrations coming out. But in that, you become frustrated when they make mistakes.
Of course. This is like loving parent syndrome.
Yeah.
It's like the same exact thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But in those moments, it's like, that's when I need that reminder. Life's short. Live it well. Be patient. These kids are wonderful. You're at a great school. They're working their hardest to become as good of people as they can, whether they like math or not. That's when I need those reminders sometimes, when it's like you've been in the grind of school for a while. So it's nice because every once in a while, too, a kid will just like kind of look and be like, you have a tattoo. Like, what does that say? And it's
reminder.
Even like, yeah. I don't go into the full story.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can't give the speech every time. It's like there's a lot of context there.
We have to learn how to find the area of this triangle. You come back to me at recess. We'll talk about this. My favorite songwriter wrote it. It's cool. We'll talk about it later.
Please take notes. Not on this. On what we're talking about. That's so good.
Now I'll tell them. What do you know? What episode number this is?
I'll know when it's out.
Know later. So I'll tell them episode number. What's really good?
Oh my god. You'll get the full story.
You'll get too much of the story. You'll know too much about me afterward, and you'll know that I love you too.
I said perfect. That. Oh my god, I have to. I thought about this earlier, and it just was reminding me as you brought up the teaching in the school. I have to tell you that I've never been a huge fan of Switchfoot. I love John Foreman. I think his songwriting's amazing. I'm just never a big fan of the band. Like, not like I thought they were bad or anything. I just never really got into it, you know?
Right.
Part of the reason I never got into Switchfoot, I don't think I still have friends from high school. Like, I wasn't popular in high school, so I haven't stayed in touch with many people. But anyone who went to high school with me, or school with me, I should say, in our district would know this. In 8th grade, it might have been in the 9th grade too, but I wasn't there in 9th grade. I switched schools. But in 8th grade, all the way through, from the start, the first day of class in 8th grade to the last day in class, every morning in like homeroom or whatever, the song "We Were Made to Live," whatever it's
we
called.
were meant to live.
We were meant to live, right? That played on the morning show thing every morning because the girl who was in charge of like that department or whatever loved Switchfoot.
Yeah.
And it became literally a school-wide, like, not joke, but just like everyone would be like, "Oh my God, that song!"
Yeah,
every morning, and it's crazy because I barely remember anything from school. I have such a terrible memory, but I remember that song.
Jeez.
And I just remember being like, "Oh my God," because it's not even like it's a great song. But when you hear a song every day, you're just like,
I wouldn't
God.
like Switchfoot either if I dealt with that. I'm like happy that this girl likes them that much, but I'm also not happy at her because she just ruined an amazing band for the entire school.
Yeah, it was what is 8th grade. So there was at the time that they've changed the system now. Now it's like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. At the time it was 8th and 9th grade were in this building. So yeah, 2 grades. Each class was like 500 people, I think. And
I'm missing out.
Ruined it for everybody. No Switchfoot fans were in that school now.
The other thing that confuses me about this. If I was going to be on a morning show like that, and I was in charge of, and I was going to play a Switchfoot song every day, Meant to Live might not get played once a whole year.
Yeah.
Like, I love that song, but that is their number one, like, most famous song they've ever written, like, is the reason they can continue to play for years and years and years. They still love the song, which also I think says a lot about John Foreman's writing and, like, them as people. And it does have a great message.
Yeah.
But, like, you can't play the same song every day, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
I don't care how much you like. I don't know.
No, it sucks the magic.
Lumineers.
Yeah, it sucks the magic, right?
Yeah, you can't do that.
I'm sorry. I had to totally derail you for a second because I did not remember that until this conversation. Like the last time I probably thought about that was 8th grade, and now I'm just piecing together in my mind the PTSD I have that has led me down a path to not listen to Switchfoot, and I think that's where it started.
That has to be it.
Because I like John Foreman. I've listened to I haven't kept up. I don't listen to that much music, honestly. I've listened to so many podcasts and like that type of stuff. But yeah, like I've always enjoyed his music, so it's just a funny little tidbit. But we were talking, just kind of jump back into kind of like the trajectory that we were on. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I forget exactly what you mentioned to me, but I remember you said something about how in your school, or just maybe particularly in your classroom, you kind of have the privilege or the ability to communicate pretty personal stuff with some students or all the students. I don't know how it works. Like, I don't know if you wanted to get into just like your relationship with students and kind of what your outlook is as a teacher in this situation. Yeah,
so I work at this very small Quaker school in Philadelphia called Frankford Friends School. It's pre-K through 8th grade, and there's like a max of 20 kids per grade. So they have one class per grade. And it's not a public school, it's a private school. And Quakers, can have different like political views, but I would say typically you get a lot more of like the liberal side. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say I'm still fairly new to Quakerism because I'm not like technically a Quaker, but I work at a Quaker school, and so this will be my 3rd year I'm going into. So I've like learned a lot over the past couple years. Of course. Well, one thing that people might know about Quakerism, if they know anything, is that Quakers don't like war.
Yeah, it's the religion of nonviolence. Yeah, similar to Amish and Mennonites, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a very like, I think, respecting religion, because you can be Christian and be Quaker. You can be like Buddhist and be Quaker. You can be sort of another like
it's inclusive
religion. Yeah, right. Because you worship in silence, and you're working on finding like that inner light. You can also be atheist and be Quaker, which
You could be atheist and be Buddhist too. I mean, these are all they kind of interlock in some ways.
So I would say I'm like maybe not fully atheist, but like definitely close to there.
Mm-hmm.
And but I really come to like Quakerism. But anyway, with that sort of setup and the really tight, close-knit community and it not being a public school, I think we're doing things at our school that make school better for the kids that are there and are going to make them better humans when they leave. Mm. And I'm a math teacher. So for me saying that, like usually math teachers have nothing to do with that part of it, right?
Yeah,
it's like, I want to learn math. And there are many days where I am like, we got to really focus here and learn math. But one of the reasons I love this job so much is because I'm not just a math teacher there. Another title of mine is a 7th grade advisor. So like the 7th grade class, they're like my main class. Mm. But when there's social issues going on within the class, I'm sure you remember middle school. Maybe you did just say you forgot most of school, but like in middle school, there's a lot of social issues going on.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, it's puberty.
Yeah, so, it's gotta be. And I even will tell this to kids sometimes. Like middle school is like probably the worst like time of life. It's just so hard to manage yourself even and like new relationships and like y'all are like learning more about the world and everyone's more able. There's another reason why I love teaching middle schoolers. They're like able to produce good thoughts and good work. And younger kids are cute, but that's my my preference there is that middle schoolers are funny even in an adult way.
Yeah, right.
And so with that, it's like, well, what do? Do you ignore the social stuff because it's not your place because it's a school, which I think is a message from public schools for the most part. And I understand why. I'm not trying to like bash them. I get it. There's a lot of like legal issues.
Yeah, like the boundaries that you can't like impede into certain like if a child tells you that their mom is beating them or if there's like some danger or something, you have to like legally then report that type of stuff.
Or if the teacher's too close to a kid, then like they're they got to get fired because they did something bad or whatever. So I get that. But I just think we take a different approach where it's like we know that there's certain things going on in the world that we don't have answers to and that you're dealing with at too young of an age, partially because of the internet and everything, Instagram and all that. The kids just see more. Yeah. Are exposed to more jokes, so they don't really understand necessarily. Or they like get the joke, but they don't get the implications. Yeah. But because we have these conversations with the kids, they're also, I think, more able to ask teachers questions that I would have never asked a teacher. Mm. I never would ask my parents.
Well, because you're like the arbiter at that point. Like, I brought this up literally just at the conference I spoke at yesterday. Did you ever watch the show Big Little Lies? It's on HBO. It's a newer show. I don't think so. There was an episode. This is a really brief tangent that ties into this. It was just this past season just ended, like last week or something like that. There's an episode in the season where I think it's first graders that are in the storyline, and there's an episode where the teachers are talking about climate change with the students, like the first graders or whatever, and then the kids obviously go home. They talk to their parents parents freak out. And there's like this big parent-teacher conference where all the parents are like outraged at the teachers, like, why are you making my kids anxious about climate change or whatever? Like, this isn't your job. They're children. Like, they shouldn't be, whatever. And it's such an interesting episode because the teacher essentially says, the thing is that almost all of the students already knew about it because they've been looking on smartphones and they've been hearing it from other people, older siblings, etc., and they don't understand it. So they're already afraid and confused. So it's our job as the teacher to essentially be the arbiter of that information because it helps them then ask the questions and process that through, which is what you're explaining in this way.
That's perfect. I got to see the show. That's fantastic.
It's such a good show. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's really a beautiful explanation of it. And I think at my school, for the most part, obviously I can't speak for every parent and every family, but for the most part, they're on board with that, which is the cool thing. Mm-hmm. Like, if we talk about climate change, which is not my area of expertise, but like even still as a math teacher, like I have enough freedom if that comes up, like we're going to talk about it. Yeah. Like the parents aren't going to be like, why would you ever talk about that? Right. Because I think we also try, and I'm guilty of not being great at this sometimes, of making sure that the communication is with the family too. So it's like, we're talking about this kind of thing in school, or like, so-and-so and I had a conversation about this today. I just wanted to let you know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even I brought this up this time. I'm sure this was before we put on the headphones and started recording. But we were talking about some of like the language that people see, and again, to reiterate, kids see. It's not the teacher's fault they're hearing of this, or the parents' fault. Just the way the world is.
There's just information everywhere now.
Yeah, they see all this information. So, and this one frustrates me that this information was out there in this way. But so, a kid in my class was watching ESPN. And Stephen A. Smith's on there. And Stephen A. Smith says that Cam Newton's thick, no homo. And the student asked me, like, is that okay to say? Like, and we had a real conversation about why it's not. Like, you know, I was just like, why does Stephen A. Smith, who is famous as all heck, have to add in that no homo? Like, we don't care if you're gay. If you were gay, great. Like you don't need to send that message, because the message he's sending is also that it's not okay to be gay.
Right.
And our kids are like really thinking through that, like really starting to think about like, oh yeah, like, yes, it's just a funny joke, but it's really not funny.
Yeah,
because
like Steven, like his audience is a little bit, it skews a little older, and it's ESPN, so it's a lot of like dads and like and older males watching this just like leisurely, and so there's a lot more of just space for that edgy type of humor. But in that same exact vein, like you're saying, ESPN is one of those shows that is just on in people's houses all the time. It's just on the background noise. Yeah. Like, of course, kids are just going to be in the room seeing this guy.
Yeah, I watched ESPN all the time growing up.
Yeah.
All the time. I was so up to date on sports, it was ridiculous. And that's where, I was a little frustrated, because I'm like, you're on ESPN.
It's a huge platform.
Like, it's not like this kid heard this joke on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally get it. Like, it's unavoidable stuff out there. But, so you hope that in all of this, like, those sorts of things go away, whereas when I was in middle school, those things were constant. I'm not saying there aren't social issues, and I'm not saying that even those things, I'm not saying I fixed that problem either. Mm-hmm. You know, that same kid who thought it through, it might make the mistake again. But I know he's thinking about it. I know they're thinking about it.
And he's coming to you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking that way when I was in middle school. I started thinking like that late high school and in college.
Mm-hmm. Same.
And I went to Ursinus, which is a very liberal school for the most part, and really pushes you to think about everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got a math degree from there, but I also know how to write. I know how to interact with people. I know how to really think deeply about everything. And that's a lot to do with Ursinus. But that's when I really started thinking about that stuff. A kid in 7th grade, 8th grade, 6th grade. You know, I think it's going to go a long way.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying every public school needs to be like that, or that they can be like that. Part of it's just because we're such a small school too.
I was going to say part of it's like a resource issue just in the education system in general. Like having, most public schools just don't have access or the funding essentially to get those programs, to get those teachers, to get that, like that relationship created. You know?
Right. I mean, we also, like, there were some issues that came up that I can't really go into this year, where the issue was bigger than something I could handle, too. So we hired outside people. Again, we know the kids well enough that we know that they need this resource that can better handle, like, conversations about healthy relationships or something than, that I'm qualified to do.
Right, of course.
Also, I don't know if this is super weird, but I teach 5th through 8th grade math, and I said there's 20 kids per grade about. So I teach the same kids in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So last year, it's not my first year working with kids, it's my second year. And like this year coming in, some of the kids that I'm working with, I'll have worked with for 3 straight years now.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons. Like, sometimes I feel like we're a little too comfortable with each other,
Yeah, it might like get off topic too much or whatever.
Yeah, or it's like, you think you can say something to a teacher that you still can't really say, even though we have a strong relationship.
Yeah, the respect boundaries.
Yeah, like that's still there, even though it's harder after 3 years or 4 years. And so I get that, but the pros far outweigh that. Like, even with math, which obviously it still has to be the focus of my job and is very much. Like, I want the kids that graduate from my school to look around the rooms in high schools and be better than everybody at math. Why? I mean, I don't know. Who knows?
No, but you said at the beginning, like, you want them to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like if you love a kid, like, it's just like a parent. Like I said, it's just if it works both ways. You could be a toxic parent and love your kids so much that you like literally hate them when they fail. You know what I mean? Or you can be a loving parent and just want the best for them and hope the best for them, and then that's enough. You know?
Yeah, and I'm also really competitive, so like I want people to know that like, oh, this kid came from Frankford Friends School from Teacher Kevin. Like, good kid.
That's the sports in you. All those years of ESPN.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, for sure. You know, that's all there. But I think even in that, it's like we can have a conversation about how you feel about math because, you know, we've gotten there. We've worked together enough, and I've stopped and said enough times to you like, how are you feeling about this, or like trying to keep people positive. You know, math more than any other subject, people say I'm bad at this. I can't do this.
That's me, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research out there now about math mindset being really important. And I think it's just it's also a competitive subject where people are like, look at that kid. He can do his multiplication table so much faster than me. It's like, that's not the enemy. It's the topic. Like, we're all here to learn the topic, and you can all do it. And it might take you longer, but that doesn't mean you're dumb.
Yeah, there's a stigma around math that isn't around any other topic, or subject, I mean.
And I tell kids all the time, I don't care if your parents can do math, because you can't control what parents say either. If I could, I would have no adult say to any kid I was bad at math back in the day. Remember that for your kids. Even though you might feel that way, don't say it.
Yeah,
until
then it just like instills that in their head, like, I'm going to be bad at math.
Yeah, I'm going to be like my dad, who I love and want to be just like, even though they're not going to say that when they're teenagers especially.
Of course, 14, 15, no way.
But, oh, well, Dad wasn't good at math, so it's okay for me not to either.
Yep.
When you're older, tell them.
I was going to say, I'm like not going to let them, like, this episode will be locked away for them. I'm going to put like some firewall over it. Like, the episode with Kevin is forbidden.
What's wrong with Kevin? When they're old enough, they can listen to this. And no. But, but it's self-talk. It's all self-talk.
No, totally. I totally get it, yeah.
You can do it, even if you're struggling at first. You're going to get it. And I like, that's one of the things, people say a lot of weird stuff in my classroom, and it's fine, it's funny, but I don't want you walking around saying I can't do this. Like, you're just not going to say that. I'm not going to let you. And that takes coaching, too, to get people out of that.
Yeah.
But, like, more so than anything, I know I said I want kids to walk into the classroom in high school and be better than everybody, and, like, while that's still a want, I really have felt value in seeing kids work with me for even a year and just feel more confident, even if they weren't doing better.
No, that confidence goes a long way in the workplace, like as they get older. You know what I mean? It's like workplace confidence, and just being a confident person just makes you excel. Like, I'm not sure what the stats are, but I guarantee they're out there.
Yeah. It's just like that belief. You don't have to be good at everything, but you can. Like, you could, just like we talked about with music, you could stop thinking about these other subjects, which I shouldn't do that, but you could stop thinking about these other subjects and just work harder on math.
Yes, yeah.
Or sometimes I also see this too. It's not even just working some kids are working too hard, but they're not working smart. So it's like learning better strategies and that sort of thing. But everyone's capable. Everyone's capable of learning math, even if you think math is dumb and it has no point. Like, I don't even want to, like, we don't have to get into that. But it's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we're not going to, they're not changing school right now.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it.
Until that's an option, like until the actual curriculum is changed, you have to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we'll make the best of it. Life's short, we'll make the best of it.
Yeah.
And we'll do our best and feel good about it, hopefully.
I think this whole dynamic between you and the students opens up an interesting conversation on the role of teachers and parents and coaches and any kind of adult figure in a student or a kid's life. Because talk about like just how traditionally, like the institutions that we've had, these institutions of education and like extracurricular activities, sports and all that for decades now, there was always this sort of general understanding that certain things were meant for the home and certain things were meant for school and meant for sports. Like if you played sports, you knew that the coach was going to be competitive and was going to bully you and be hard. Like, just stereotypically, maybe not literally every coach, but most coaches, that environment was just very competitively driven. You know that at home, you're going to like learn respect, et cetera, whatever. And, you know, at school, you're going to like learn respect, et cetera. And there's certain problems in growing up that kind of get like assigned to a given, you know what I mean? Like a given adult figure. And it's interesting how in recent decades, I think most of those walls have kind of deteriorated as lifestyle changes have occurred. I mean, just taking a few like really easy examples, like women in the workplace. Like way more women are working today as like careerists instead of like just stay-at-home moms. And you got that. You got just like traditional boundaries breaking down between like you got parents that are working from home. You got like you're saying, like private institutions that are stepping in more of these like parental roles in some cases. So it's interesting to consider just what as we look at the role of like adult figures in kids' lives, like what those boundaries should be. Because I think it's interesting how you pointed out the one example, which I think is great, how there was a situation in your school where there was the need to bring in outside support from like a specialized person or network or whatever. So it's super important to come to that realization, like, hey, here's an area where we aren't versed enough to meet this kid's needs or whatever, so we need help. Very important to know. There's also, like you've been saying, though, all along, there's also this, I think, grace period involved in a teacher and a student's life, just like there is in any adult in a kid's life, that there should be an understanding that like there's certain areas that are going to be gray, and that if a student is trusting this teacher, that there should be some space for communication. Like if a student is asking really deep questions or questions that are very highly like impactful to that time in their life, the teacher should be able to make that relationship. You know what I mean? And like you said earlier, caveats included, totally understand like why the law is the way it is, and there's certain boundaries in place for predatory behavior and all that. And I totally get it. But like you're saying, I mean, just going back to being human, I mean, if a kid isn't getting that from their home and they're not getting it from their coach or whatever these third-party adults may or may not be, maybe their pastor or their youth leader or whatever the hell it might be, they got to get it from somewhere, right? And if they're coming to a teacher, it's most likely indicative that they're not getting it somewhere else, right? Or they're not comfortable getting it from their parents or whatever. So, I mean, maybe talk a little bit more about that. 'Cause that's just my take. Like I don't know what the answer is. I just think it's an interesting like discussion topic in terms of these walls have broken down largely of traditional examples of this, and I definitely think there should be more of a grace period and understanding between these kind of blurred lines. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I think part of the thing is, like you said, certain kids are going to get it from some places and not others, and that doesn't even mean that the other adults are doing a bad job. Like, my parents were very supportive growing up. I really can't complain much without complaining just to complain. You know, they're still together, which it's, that's a lot now.
Yeah, right.
They're still together, and we didn't have financial worries. We weren't like filthy rich or anything, but we were in a good school district, and my parents were there for me. My mom was at like all sorts of sports games forever. I remember having a basketball coach who knew he could look up and find her somewhere in the crowd at every game, home or away. So I had all that stuff. There were still things that I wouldn't be comfortable asking my parents. Yes,
exactly. It's like preferential, and it might not even be because it's like a male-female thing. It might even just be, and I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying in general, it might literally be a temperamental thing. Like you're just gravitated toward a certain adult figure because you feel like you can relate temperamentally.
Yeah. And the reason could even be silly and superficial. Like, I know that there's kids at my school who, at first, I don't think that this is like the only reason now, but at first respected me because I was fast at running. Like, they saw me run at recess and were like, that teacher's cool.
Yes.
Like what?
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with me being a good math teacher or anything else.
Or maybe you like understood a meme reference, or you like got a joke, or you're a musician, or any number of things could attract the student to totally.
Yeah, and then getting a meme is
I'd be a great teacher.
That's why it was great to have you talk to some of our kids.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh my god, that was so funny. And I didn't even know you were in the room. Remember when the camera kind of panned and you're in the corner? I was like, oh my god.
Yeah,
that was fantastic.
Like the kids loved that, by the way. And thank you again for.
Yeah, it was a great. I could tell they were a great group of kids.
Yeah, and they like. As soon as I started, they again. This even earned me like cool points because it's like I showed them the Steakum profile on Twitter. And, we didn't, like, scroll through for days or anything. Of course, but I just talked about how you grew the following and how, like, it's, depending on what you interact with, obviously, it's a famous thing right now, right. Like, there's people who, if I say, like, oh, I'm friends with the Steakum dude, they're like, what? That's so cool.
Yeah, it is crazy, isn't it? Like, the conference I did yesterday, I was like, raise a hand, like, show of hands. I was trying to get, like, a framework to be like, how much should I explain, like, what Steakum is, what the Twitter is, and all that. And there was, like, maybe 75 people in the room, and, like, 10 or 15 raised their hands, and I was like, whoa, like that's weird, like to have people that like willingly are following and I've heard about this, like it is a crazy feeling. Yeah.
So I mean, stuff like that, these kids like really would gravitate to that sort of thing. Even another thing at my school especially, but I think across a lot of schools you could see this, there's not a lot of male teachers, a lot of female teachers, which is great, I'd say it makes sense too in a lot of cases with some younger kids that females just tend to like gravitate towards that more.
Right.
Whatever it is, I can't really explain it all nowadays.
Sure there's a lot of complex factors involved.
Because I don't really get why more guys wouldn't want to be teachers, but I don't know. It's just like how it is, or at least ended up how it is at my school too. So like they get to middle school. And right now, if you went through Frankford Friends all the way up to the point where I would start teaching them in 5th grade, they would have a male teacher in 3rd grade, and that's it. Besides, we also have a music teacher who's male. So, and we just got a PE teacher who's male too. So you have 2 specialists. But then, like, your actual...
Like the core curriculum.
You'd have 1 male over the course of that amount of time, which again it's not like a bad or a good thing, but the thing that happens is as a male teacher you get more like, I don't know what it is, just kind of like of a connection with some of the male students because they're like, oh, here's another male.
Yeah.
So there's like males who might be like tough in other situations, but like we've had that competitive back and forth toe to toe thing, even at like literally at recess sometimes. It's like, okay, let's race,
That's great.
type of thing. And it's like, oh, we're good in the classroom now. Like I don't have a problem with.
Yeah, there's like respect.
Yeah, and it goes the other way with girls too. Like there's certain things that, especially in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, that plenty of girls aren't going to be comfortable coming to me to. Hey, totally.
Of course, yeah.
Makes sense. And there's things that guys probably, I would even say this, I bet you in 20 years when I'm 46 and if I've like lost some of my hair or something, or, there's going to be some guys who would be more or less comfortable with me because I was older. Like right now I might get some of this like, oh, he's young, he gets our memes type of thing. And later I'm not going to get that. But then later I might get this more like he's like an established adult.
Now he's like a mentor.
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel weird for you as you already, like, I know it's kind of weird even speaking of it in these terms because we are still young. You're like 26. It's not like you're old, but doesn't it still feel weird kind of on this topic of the information highway that it does feel like time moves at such a crazy pace now, like in compared to how it used to, because culture and memes and everything are seen through this microscopic lens where like we're all paying such close attention to reality on a monthly basis that time just feels like way different. So it feels like a month maybe feels like a year for some people. And do you feel like as time has gone on for you in the past couple of years of teaching that you've already kind of felt yourself more, not, I don't want to say disconnected from the students, but disconnected maybe from like youth culture as you get older? Like have you already started to feel that even though you're still really young at all?
I think so. I haven't started to feel like disconnected yet, but I am starting to feel that it's a little bit harder to get myself to stick with everything. Yeah, it's just so much. Like every year, it's so much. Like the references, the apps they're using, like you're saying. Yeah, that's the apps, because some of them, they'll be on some app that doesn't have the strength and stay power of like an Instagram or something. Exactly. Like they have Instagram, and like Yeah, it's like kind of cool that their teacher gets how to use Instagram too. Like if somebody did something that's like taboo for Instagram and the kid talks about it, like I get that. Like I'd be like, yeah, you can't do that on Instagram. You know what I mean? Oh, my mom did this. Like, yeah, I get it. But we got this random app that this lifespan is like 3 months.
Yeah, and then it's gone.
It's like I can't really like keep up with all that anymore as quickly, at least. Like I'm aware of it, but I'm not going to dive into it for those 3 months and then like
it's like a pointless endeavor. Uphill battle forever.
It's wild. It's got me thinking too about I teach technology too, like once a cycle for each grade. And it's funny how many times I have to say to them, like even when I was in middle school, how much different it was. Or like talking to them about having a computer that had the internet and the phone was like the same thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Like it's literally a different universe.
And it's like the thing that's mind-boggling to me is like they can't even like conceive of that.
Yeah.
Like they're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. That's so lame. And I'm like, that was like it was like not long ago.
It wasn't long ago at all. Yeah.
I was like lucky to have a cell phone 10 years ago when I was 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like a flip phone.
It was like a razor or something.
Yeah. You know, like that. And I told them that story too. Oh, you were cool if you had a razor.
Yeah, literally. Like I remember I had one of those like crappy like Nokia flip phones or something like that, and all the kids had razors. And I didn't even have it actually. It was my mom's. And, like I would take it like when I went snowboarding, or she'd be like, "Call me like when you get picked up or whatever." And all my friends would have the razors, and I'm like, "Oh, you guys, it's
they were
so cool." Yeah.
I remember I had a Boost Mobile like brick phone in 8th grade.
Oh, nice.
Couldn't even flip, and you had to like put minutes on it or whatever.
Yeah.
So I tell them these stories, and they're like.
Like you're ancient, Mr. Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah, Teacher Kevin, he's but I mean they know that I'm young too though, so I think that helps with the like it literally was not that long ago, guys.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I was sitting in school, you know, not really that long ago with this dumb phone.
Yeah.
And now y'all are like 5th grade with iPhones. Yeah. And it's just different. But I tell them that too. I'm like, we're going to talk about how you have to navigate some things that adults don't have answers to. Like the adults don't have the answers to how to navigate Instagram as a 5th grader. They're trying. So like if you want to get frustrated at mom or dad for doing something, like we're all trying to figure this out. We don't know what's best. We don't. I mean, even think about it like I'm on my parents' cell phone plan. There's no precedent for getting off of your parents' cell phone plan. Yeah. Our generation is the first one.
The first one. I am too. Mine's through work, and my wife is too. Like she pays like she gives her mom a certain amount of money a month because it's like a family plan. Yeah. Or whatever. So it's like she just pays like her mom just takes it out of her bank account. It's like it just never stops.
Yeah. It's like, but there was a precedent for like, oh, you get kicked out of the house or whatever, or like you got to get a job by now. There's no like. People or health insurance, there's laws, you just get
now
booted
it's like,
off.
Yes.
There's no cell phone one.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and I feel like it helps too in terms of just relating back to the students to maybe like try to explain to them in terms they understand that when they're your age, they'll be going through the same thing. Like the technology is only getting weirder and crazier. Like you might be laughing at the teacher right now as a 13-year-old or whatever because they don't get the hip app. Like you aren't going to get the hip app when you're that age. And I feel like even as someone who grew up like you and I grew up with the internet, like as it got older, and especially for me, like it's literally my job to be online all day. Like I know more about the culture of Reddit and 4chan and Tumblr and YouTube and all like the history of all these platforms more than literally probably 99% of the population. And there's still like millions of people that know way, way, way more than me. But I mean, I'm in that like nerdy tech upper echelon of people that just actually like to learn about this stuff and it's interesting to me. But even again, when it comes to, like you're saying, these newer apps and what the younger generations are into, like what they're using, like what's cool to them, there is no way to keep up with all of it. Like it's literally impossible. Like I do this for a living. Right. It's literally impossible to keep up with all the tech trends. And you might be thinking, like, say there's a 13-year-old listening to this podcast right now. You might be thinking right now, well, I grew up with memes. I grew up with all this. I'm always going to get it. You aren't. Like, no one can. You literally can't. Like, take it from me, a guy who grew up with the internet and works in the internet. It's my job. It's still impossible. Like, you can't keep up with the youth. Like, the kids, it's literally like the concept of almost like counterculture. Like, teens do things that essentially undermine or oppose what the adults do. Hence, like, teenagers create Finstagram accounts, like they're fake Instagrams.
Yeah.
Like, they don't want to be like, it can even be as simple as their older sibling. Like, maybe their older sibling is 4 years older than them, and they think they're lame. Maybe they might think they're cool, but I just mean, like, there's even cases where kids look at like the apps that their older sibling are using, and they're like, that's lame. I don't want to use that. I'm not going to be like my older sibling. So it's an uphill battle eternally, and yeah, you can only do so much to keep up.
And teaching does help me keep up a bit.
Like, because you're constantly interacting with it.
When Finstas were like, I knew about those right away.
Yeah.
People are like, what's this Finsta thing? And I'm like, oh.
That's old news.
Yeah, let me tell you. Because I was working with a freshman, and she showed me she had this Finsta and a regular. They'll explain it to me. Mm-hmm. The other thing, though, that blows my mind, I did not understand when I was a kid, and I wish I did, and I keep coming to these understandings, is that you say stuff like, you're never going to be able to keep up. That's okay.
Yeah,
I'm happy.
It's okay. Yeah,
when I was in college and I was, going out with my friends on Fridays and Saturdays and all that stuff, I thought about how lame it was when people were older and didn't want to do that anymore. Now I don't want to do that anymore. I love it.
It's great.
It's amazing.
You grow into it. Yeah, you just grow with it. Yeah.
I was worried about people spreading out and not having conversations with friends as much anymore. I love talking to my friends. I don't want to talk to them every day, and I'm okay with that.
The space is fine.
When I was younger, that would freak me out. Even in college, I was like, what do you mean you're not responding to my text? Now it's like, take a day.
Well, and it's way more temperamental, too, because when you're temporal, I should say, like when you're in grade school and high school and even college, many, if not most, of those relationships go away. You know what I mean? Like, you don't keep in touch. Like, kids, maybe they move across the country. Maybe they move across the world. Or maybe they move across the state. They work in a different industry. Like, it's very difficult to keep those relationships intact, whereas the relationships you do keep intact post-college tend to be lifetime relationships, because it's like the roots are already established. So you might go a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 or 4 years without seeing a person, but then you get lunch with them or whatever, you go to the bar, and it's just normal. Yeah. It's like you never left. You're like, oh, well, it's fine that we haven't seen each other this long. You've got the kids. I moved here and work overtime. This is great. Like, it doesn't feel... You know what I mean? But when you're younger, it's like, oh my God, like so-and-so's going to this school. I'm never going to see them again. So-and-so started hanging out with this group of friends. So-and-so got into this sports team. Like, everything is constantly moving, and it feels so fragile. And it's like, it makes sense that it's harder to hold on to and you get more scared. But yeah, you get older and it's just like, this is life. People have lives, and you make time when you can make time, and it's fine.
And I'm so happy that I'm like coming to this too, because there's things that I'm worried about when I'm getting older that I'm realizing are just going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been joking with Christy about this, and I am kind of like scared of losing my hair, but I'll be okay. Like, I'll be at a point in my life where I'm just going to be okay if that happens and when that happens, And so I feel better having had experiences where that's happened, where I can look forward and say, it's going to be okay then too.
Right,
but at the same time, I really don't want to forget what you were just talking about, because I think I would be a wildly ineffective teacher if I forgot how fragile things were, especially in middle school.
Yeah.
Because that's when people talk about relating, like, that's what you got to do is remember, like,
put yourself in those shoes. Yeah.
I remember what it was like. I remember what it was like to be frustrated with my parents, even though I love them to death. I remember what it was like to have too much homework, or to, like, not care about a project, or to be really, really upset that somebody didn't talk to me.
Yeah, or to have a crush on someone and they never pay attention to you, or to have acne. Like, to be like, I would wake up in the morning, and I didn't even have bad acne. Like, I had acne, but looking back, there were people that had it way worse than I had it. But it felt like the end of the world in the morning.
And you can't, what you just did, you can't do at that age.
It's impossible.
You can't compare
You can't rationalize it,
and say, well, these people have it worse, so, I'm fine.
Yep.
It's totally... One of the most amazing things, though, that I think I've realized from the kids that I work with, a lot of them actually understand what they're going through right now is because of how old they are. And, like, this guy, he was really upset one day about I forget what it was, something with a friend group. And he said to me while he was crying, I know that this is part of just my age. And
oh my
like,
gosh.
with like all of the, stuff that I'm going through with my body and everything right now, that I'm feeling this way. And I know that that's a big part of it, and I'm going to be okay.
That's some crazy introspection. And you only get that now with the information age. It's like the constant just like mirroring and conversations that you're getting hit with from every angle. It's like it's like I don't know how healthy that even is. Like forcing introspection at such a young age. It's like you almost the time to overthink that stuff. You're supposed to kind of like gradually move into that. But yeah, like I wonder how young kids are getting to that point where they are like self-actualizing these things. So that's a crazy thing to consider.
I mean, I think there's plenty of things that are bad that kids are exposed to earlier, but that's one thing where I'm just like, they should learn. Like they should start to come to that. I mean, if I understood that stuff when I was that age, it wouldn't have been so hard, I think. To be able to say like, I know that I'm just feeling this way because, I mean, obviously it's not like he was just like happy after that. Like he was still upset about what was going on, but like this is the type of thing that keeps kids out of like horrible depressions and things like that. Like when there's so many, that's the bad side of all this information is I think there's a lot of things that can make younger people more depressed because they're bombarded with the negatives of the world that they can't do anything about yet.
Right, they're powerless to it, yeah.
We're teaching kids how to be empowered politically, but like as a 6th grade kid,
you have no voting power. Yeah, you have no voice in society.
You can't even go vote against Trump.
Yeah,
and not to say that kids don't have any power. We've seen plenty of examples where they have made political statements through the internet and that sort of thing recently, and it's been really powerful. But I imagine they feel like as a kid, you must feel like I felt that there isn't a lot of places where you have control in your life.
Yes, exactly.
So then to know, we have this racist president, but I feel powerless about that. And it's just more and more, and we live in a racist country. There's wars being fought over religion. There's all this, there's like domestic abuse. There's sex trafficking.
And this literally, to kind of just jump in, I mean, that's exactly what you were just describing a moment earlier where you're saying, insofar as like a parent or an adult figure's ability to help guide a child, this information that's coming in, like to explain like, hey, the reason you're feeling this thing is because of this. And then the kid can kind of like grow into that and be like, oh, I know that this is because I'm this age. I know that this is because I'm depressed or there's this whatever deficit that it might be. Yeah. That's like super, super healthy. But then, like this is like the flip side of it too, because with the excessive information, when you're that age, you can't process it. Like there's a reason that parents traditionally and adult figures in general have traditionally shielded younger kids, I think, from self-actualization and from like answering those, because it's like the age-old stereotype. Like the kid goes, "Mommy, like, is God real?" or whatever, and then like the mom just comes up with some like fairy tale or some like metaphor, and she does it not because she doesn't want to tell her kid, but because she's like, traditionally it's understood, like it's like, I don't know if it's psychological or whatever, or if maybe it's all based on lies, but the idea is that like, hey, they're too young to process this, you know what I mean? So it's like you're saying, with the negativity, if you look at any news cycle, any social media platform, constant bombardment of all the atrocities of the world, because that's what gets the most clicks. Right. So it's like there's a ton of good stuff happening everywhere, but the atrocities get the most clicks, and that's being just funneled non-stop into these little human brains. And then I agree with you. I think that long-term, and in most cases, the ability to self-actualize and to understand your own circumstances is more beneficial than not at those younger ages, because we should be treating children, I think, with much more respect, like treating them like they are small adults instead of being like patronizing. Like I 100% agree with that point. I also just think it comes with that negative baggage to then trying to psychologically, I think there's going to be decades of more research before we have a better understanding of this. 'Cause it's just like, how do children's brains process this level of information? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
And it's also like when you say like like the God answer. I thought, well, when I have a kid, I'm just going to tell him the truth, or what I believe to be the truth, or like what is the like, there's a lot of different philosophies about
like, no
it.
one knows.
No one
like,
really
yeah,
knows.
Yeah.
This is what Dad believes. This is what Mom believes. This is what
your parent or grandparents believe or whatever. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. I want to have that conversation. But the problem when I think about that answer is I always think about middle school kids, because that's who I work with every day, and I understand them really well. I feel like I understand a middle school kid better than a lot of people in the world in general who aren't middle school teachers.
Yeah.
But what about a younger kid? Like, then I think about that question. What do I do when I get that question and the kid's in first grade? I don't really know them that well. Now, luckily, Christy's teaching elementary school, so hopefully she'll have all those answers, and I'll have the middle school answers. But yeah, it's tough.
It's a lot, man. Do you we can kind of wind down here. I know we've been going for a while. It's been a fun conversation. I knew it would be fun. I knew it would be a fun one with you.
Every time we have like sat down to have a meal or something, I was like, if somebody recorded that could have been a podcast.
Hey, you put good people in a room. You never know what's going to happen. I wanted to ask you at some point on the topic of us recording a podcast, this being a public broadcast in some sense of the word. I mentioned this before we started recording, just being like, hey, I always ask a guest before we get into it, like, hey, are there any guardrails we should be mindful of? Like, is there anything you want to talk about, not talk about? Like, what are some things just to kind of like set the stage a little bit before we jump in? And it is something interesting to consider that we kind of briefly talked about before we started recording, where I'm a public person. I didn't set out to be a public person. I've always been a musician, and it just so happens I believe, I'm sure there's other Nathan Alabachs out there, but they're just not on Google at all. I'm the only Googleable Nathan Alabach, and because of that, I've always been quote unquote public. Like, if you Google my name, you can find my music, you can find my personal social media pages. There's just nothing else that comes up. You know what I mean? So I've just kind of fell into that, and also I have relatives and family that are in business and whatnot, so it's just all kind of tied in. And obviously through the podcast and through my work with Stakem and other social media stuff, it's all kind of pushed me into the public sphere. I didn't the first year or so I managed that account. I tried to stay off the public stuff, but then after you get interviewed a few times, it's well, now
people knew who you were.
Yeah, it's I'm out there. What do I do? Do I just erase my social media, or do I embrace it? I don't know. I'm a pretty open person. I'm just gonna embrace it. I'm podcasting with people now. So, and needless to say, though, I'm at a point now where I know, there's consequences to all my words. Kind of going back to this whole thing with Stephen A. Smith. You're looking at this guy on ESPN. You're he has one of the biggest platforms in the world. He should have some kind of responsibility, or he should at least be thinking more about the consequences of his words. For better or worse, I think about it all the time. I'm always, even in this own conversation, there's been points where 10 minutes previously, I'll be thinking back, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that thing. Or I worded that really poorly. I'm always being is someone going to perceive this the wrong way? And anyway, all I'm trying to get at though is you as a teacher. I mean, it's interesting considering the implications of you being a public figure, someone who has produced music. You are coming on this podcast. I know you've done at least one other podcast before. You did with Bob Cahill. So in thinking about that, I mean, do you have any apprehensions? What's it like for you, considering the fact that this could potentially be permanently out there? Your future kids could hear it, your students could hear it, your future students could hear it. Have you thought about the consequences of just being a public person at all as a teacher? Yeah, definitely. I thought about it a lot, because it's also one of those things that most advice you would get is to do the opposite of what I'm doing. A lot of teachers, everything's private. They will use their middle names instead of last names, or they just don't even have social media anymore. And that was a lot of advice I got in college, was to delete it all. And at first, I mean, the biggest thing that kept me from doing that was I was a musician, and I thought at the time that there was going to be a day when I quit teaching to be a musician, and so I couldn't delete it. Especially as a local musician, what are you going to do? Yeah, exactly. Come up with some what do you call it, a pen name, or what do you call it, a pseudo? Yeah, it's not as easy to market. Yeah, one of them might be Bono or something. I don't know. But it wasn't going to work. So, but what I realized, one of my first jobs, I put my Twitter account to private, and some kids came in to school with some of my tweets printed out.
but the account was private. So at that moment, I was just like, there is no point for me trying to hide if I'm going to be online.
Yeah, what was the context for it? Were they just like messing around?
They were messing around. I was a new teacher. I was a substitute. Like I came in February, and they were 8th graders, so they're like at the top of the school, and they're just kind of like, I was like their 3rd teacher that year, who's this young guy, he's 22, 23 or whatever. They probably thought it was cool and funny and didn't understand how disrespectful it was looking back, but I didn't get it then.
Yeah.
But so I was just like, they're going to find it. Like, kids are going to, you better delete everything or they're going to find it.
Yeah.
So at that point, I did a long, audit of my social media. I scrolled back on Twitter as far as you can possibly scroll, and I deleted everything that had a curse word in it. I deleted everything that had anything like even seemingly
it could be interpreted as problematic or suggestive. Yeah, totally.
And I realized that if I spent all that time doing that, and I did the same thing on Facebook. With Facebook, it took a year because every Facebook memory that popped up, I read all of the Facebook memories and I deleted the ones that were problematic. So, which everyone has those, right? Like we started using Facebook. I was like a freshman in high school or something. So like, of course I said dumb stuff. But then I realized once I did that, the only thing I had to do from now on is keep in mind that anyone could be listening. My students could be listening. If my students listen to this podcast, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really okay with that. I hope that some of them do. They're just going to get to know me better. And I don't think that I've said anything today or online anywhere since I did that audit that makes me a bad role model. I think the way I view it is my social media, if kids are going to find it, they don't, when they're current students, like we don't like friend each other, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to accept Facebook and friend invitations,
yeah, of course.
But like with the amount of Finstas and things, like I can't possibly like block every kid from Instagram or something, you know what I mean? So I do my like professional responsibility. And if a kid asks me to follow, I'll tell them to wait until after 8th grade, like after they've graduated, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I know they're going to find stuff, even if they're not following me. They do. And I think it's just another opportunity for them to see me as a role model. Like I'm interacting on the internet in a way that I think is healthy. And it's kind of good because it keeps me in check all the time. Like, so I have opinions. I'm going to make sure that even when I'm in a setting like this where we're good friends and we're recording something, that my opinions are shared in a respectful way, and that they're things that I would be comfortable telling my kids if they asked.
Right.
Like, if somebody asks me how I feel about Trump, I'm going to give them that whole, like, you're asking your teacher this sort of thing, but I don't like him.
Yeah.
And I didn't vote for him.
Yeah.
At a public school, I couldn't say that, and I wouldn't have. I would have talked about respect and that sort of thing.
Right.
But, like, there just comes a point where it's like, you got to understand that I'm a person, and I think all my kids understand that. I'm a person. I make mistakes. I have opinions, and they have opinions, and it's all okay for us to share all those things. I'm not being hateful anywhere. If I'm going to say something dumb, I'm sure Christy's heard plenty of dumb stuff at home since we moved in. Like, there's a time when I turn it off, but I'm really cognizant of that.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I'm not at home, I'm on.
Well, this goes right back to this idea of being like an arbiter of information, because in doing that as a teacher, you're taking on a similar understanding and etiquette as a journalist should, ideally, whereas a good journalist, in most cases, will not pretend like they're objective, because just like teachers, journalists are people. They have biases. They're coming from certain perspectives. Like there is, if there is anyone listening who thinks that there's like this point on the map that makes you objective or like perfectly centrist or moderate, it just doesn't exist. It literally has never and never will exist, because everyone defines the spectrum differently. No two people are going to see like left and right exactly the same. Like I can have a conversation with a socialist friend of mine. Their understanding of the American political spectrum is going to be vastly different than if I have a conversation with my conservative parents. It's just not even going to be like the same universe. Like they're talking about completely different things. So if you pretend like I'm between these things, it's a joke, because like to one side you might be considered far left, and to the other side you might be considered considered far right. So all that to say, I mean, in terms of delegating your responsibilities socially and publicly in that way, I think it's so important just to be honest about your personal experiences and your personal opinions, because you can do that in a way where you're setting aside those biases while you're teaching a lesson. Or you can say, I'm teacher Kevin, whatever, here's my opinion on Trump. But as I teach you, like if say you were teaching political science or something like that, I'm going to be impartial as I can to this subject matter. Like you can be honest about the biases because everybody has them, but you should also in some way try to frame the conversations in an open, respectful way, like you said, where you're inspiring people to ask questions. Like you're inspiring them to be curious and to be like, oh, Kevin thinks this. I wonder why he thinks this. Let me ask. Maybe they just totally disagree with you. Maybe they're on the opposite end of the spectrum. Yeah. So then instead of shutting them down and making them feel isolated, you make them think, well, what kind of questions can I ask him? Like, I wonder why he thinks that way because I don't think that way. So instead of being like the douche teacher who's like, you know, F this guy, you get to be like, I don't like this guy. Here's why I don't like this guy. But we're going to continue learning about so-and-so topic because that's like what I'm here to teach. Like I'm not, and I think that's like a whole nother tangent. I think it's a major problem right now with journalists being public. And I think like traditionally the responsibility of a journalist it's been completely deteriorated in today's internet climate because people like the media itself, like the journalism model is broken to the point where it's now based on clicks, and so much of those clicks are based on outrage, and so much of that outrage is based on this like highly personal opinions from journalists instead of actual reporting, which is like that's what people want now. It's like they follow journalists for their hot takes and their opinion pieces instead of actually looking for the the clearest impartial story of the matter. And it's more and more difficult to find that. And I think that as a teacher or any arbiter of information, it's so important to not pretend like you're one, not to pretend you're objective, but two, not to try to enforce the biases. Don't be the opposite either. Like, don't try to enforce whatever thing is onto your students because all that does is isolate young, growing minds that are trying to take in information. You know,
right? Yeah, I had a student who thought that his mom was like too feminist. You know, and we had a lot of good conversations about that. You know, that's what it was though. They were
conversation.
Yeah, good conversations. Like I was like, oh, I wonder, like why do you think that your mom is that way and that sort of thing? And it's like, you know, but that's what it's about. Now I think I'm also kind of lucky in the sense that I teach math because those conversations will now come up more naturally. Like that conversation that I'm thinking of, like it didn't happen in the classroom, you know, it happened like, I forget where we were, like the playground or something. But even with math though, I try to tell kids and just be clear as day all day that I'm a human. The only reason I'm so good at math, in air quotes, is because I've done this for so long, even though I'm young. Like, I did what they were doing 13 years ago, and I haven't stopped doing math. So, of course, I can multiply, like, some numbers in my head or something. Or, of course, I always remember how to solve a proportion. Like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. But I tell that to them because they're like, wow, you know so much math. I'm like, that's what happens when you work really hard at something for a long time, and you're going to do it too. Yeah. It might not be math if you don't want it to be, but you're going to be that good at something when you're 26.
Oh, yeah. That's so important. Yeah, that is so important. Because, like, it's so easy, especially as they grow up, looking at Instagram accounts of celebrities and people that are young that are blowing up. Like, to take Mason Ramsey, that kid who's like 12 or 13 now, and he's the yodeling Walmart kid who got famous, you know? Yeah. And he's like a child, and he's world famous now. He's like blowing up, he's viral. Most people, I should say, know about who this kid is. And it's like, if you're a kid who's that kid's age, and you're looking at that, you're thinking, that's so unfair, or that's so crazy that he like got famous. He's my age. How did that happen? Whereas, and you see, that's again, just like outrage media is what's like risen to the top of most journalism. That type of sensationalism is what's risen to the top of most like celebrity media, where it's like, what are the craziest, most like out there fringe stories in Hollywood. Like, what are these, like the yodeling Walmart kid? You know what I mean? Like, could there be a more classic archetypal example of like the Ellen Show? You know what I mean? Like, the Ellen Show is like become known as like the place where when you have your viral moment, you go on Ellen to talk about. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it's fine. It's fun. Culturally, we can talk about it. We can joke about it. But when you're that age, when you're really young and you're constantly bombarded with that messaging, you're thinking to yourself, when's my moment going to come? Like, how am I going to get famous? How am I going to become super successful and popular and smart like my teacher or whatever it might be? Yeah. And it's so hard to drill back into them. Like, this does not happen overnight for anything. Like, you have to be the 0.0000001% of the population that you get that stroke of luck if it's a combination of genetics and experience and upbringing and all these things that align to make you that way. Otherwise, you're just like the rest of us, and you got to put in the hours and years of commitment to whatever it is that you're doing to get good at it, you know?
Well, Walmart kid's not even good at anything. The thing that I do, I think it's working. Like, I have kids. I remember this one time there was a prompt, and it was kind of like, it was a fairly corny advisory prompt, but it was about this. The only reason I think it was corny is because I really believe the kids that I'm teaching are like, they're just in a better place than I remember being in middle school. Smarter, more well-rounded.
Right.
So the prompt was something about this like woman who, I forget exactly what it was, but she did something with space or like physics or something, like really intense, amazing thing. And I was like, so she just like became famous. Like, she just was always a genius. And, you know, and I got like some of the nastiest looks. These kids were like, what? Like, what are you talking about? She probably worked really hard. Like, she probably, and I was like, good. Like, one, my acting is good enough that I faked that. Second, like, you'll actually get it. Like, or at least are at the point where you can like awesome. Put that into words that like, no, that person did not become a famous physicist because they were just good at.
Right.
She probably worked really hard in science class or whatever.
That's phenomenal.
So
that's great, man. I love it. And I love just the concept that you mentioned this before we started recording, just how no matter how old you are, whether you're preaching to these kids or you're talking to your peers or parents or whatever, all of us have gone to school, so we can all easily relate to what it is that you're going through and what you're projecting onto these kids. I mean, it's such a great career field in terms of you're teaching, but you're teaching because you're in a position of lifetime learning. Like, you're able to constantly look back to those years through the kids, like you're seeing through their eyes and trying to project back to them your own experience. So it's like a constant like reuptake of learning and taking in new experiences and remembering old experiences. And it's such a cool thing to be able to do that. And it's so clear, like, just listening to you talk about all this, I mean, like you've been reiterating again, I don't want to, it's so dumb that I even have to do these caveats, but like, I know someone's listening probably like, well, he's not perfect. Like you've said a million times, like everybody makes mistakes. No one's perfect. Like, of course you're going to screw up or whatever. Like there's not a single perfect teacher or perfect anybody, but I can just tell from taking in the conversation and like how your outlook is shaped on it, how you talk about your students, like just your thought process insofar as how you decide to teach and all that. It's so phenomenal that you come to the table with the worldview that you come to it, because I think, you know, I think most teachers, I think there's a lot of stereotypes about any career field, but with teachers, there's a lot of stereotypes around just like people that, I don't know, like it's because it's such an underpaid job industry, I think, and teachers are always like demanding more money because of that. And there's a lot of intrinsic problems with like funding and all that. And it's all very complex and political. And because of that, I think there's a stigmatization on teachers where it's like, well, why should teachers be making more money? Like they're not doing that much. Like they're just glorified babysitters, or they're, you know, I mean, there's a lot of stereotypes around just like the role of teachers in society. And I think it's so important to just like break that down and be like, in reality, like there's a lot of fields that you can get into. Like we were talking earlier, you could get into real estate, you can get into business, you could get into being a doctor, and you could get into any of those. Well, maybe not being a doctor as much, but you can get into a lot of fields with the understanding that you're going to make a lot of money. People that get into teaching, in almost all cases, get into it because they love it, you know? And it's like, along the way, it's easy to lose sight of that for a lot of teachers, I think. There's a lot of jaded teachers, a lot of cynical teachers. Like, for sure, we've all had bad teachers. I'm not saying they're all perfect angels or anything like that, but I think it's great that you're maintaining the worldview around teaching that you have, and you're reflective enough that I think you'll be able to continue to look back on that worldview and keep shaping it rather than degrading it. Whereas a lot of teachers, I think you get to that point where it's just like you hit the wall, you know, like maybe it's like a bad school district, maybe it's just bad students, maybe bad personal life, whatever it is. You hit that wall and you just like lose sight of why you got into it, you know? And I think with your mindset you have right now, if you maintain it, I just don't see that happening, you know?
Well, I appreciate that a lot. And I think it's something I think about, that if I am going to lose that at some point, I'm going to stop teaching. Like I've said that
that's powerful.
a lot of times, that if I'm not going to keep doing it if I hit that point where it's just like stale for me.
Yeah, just teach to teach for a job or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, like you said, people don't get into teaching for money. They get into teaching in spite of the money. Like, unless you're at a really nice school district, a nice public school district like in Chester County or something, like Great Valley where I went. It's like, should the teachers be paid more? Yeah, but if you stay there long enough, you can make a decent living there. It's not like, you know, it's not like every school district everywhere is poor, but that's the exception.
Totally, yeah.
And at a private school, like people think private school, so they have a lot of money. No, like we don't get all the federal funding.
Yeah, right.
So it's strictly tuitions and donations and things. So like I work at a private school and I'm making less than I would at some public schools, more than I would at some public schools probably too. But like I'm not there for the paycheck.
Totally, yeah.
Besides the fact that there is one, you know what I mean? Like I have to acknowledge that. Like I wouldn't do it for free.
Of course. Just like any of this, it goes back to the musician thing too. It's like hence the struggle of any creation, any art, any work. It's like, of course, there's going to be that tug and that pull back and forth of like passion, monetary gain, having an identity, growing up. Like these are all things that are tied into your decision making as you get older. Of course, you couldn't do it for free. That's not a exceptional thing to say at all. We all work in that mindset to a degree.
Yeah. But you know, it is. I hope I can keep up the mindset too. Of just, I mean, patience is the big thing I think of. Just being patient and understanding that like there's new people learning something that I learned a long time ago, and we're all going to get there. And it's going to be great. But you know, the kids teach you a lot too. And I thought it was really corny when I was young. The teacher said, like, we're trying to make lifelong learners, you know. My schools must have done a good job because I really do feel like I am one.
That's great.
And I try to stay away from corny phrases as much as possible because I know it's, with kids, I mean, because I know some of them think it's annoying.
Unless you're being ironic.
Yeah,
then you get
that
like
too.
Meta level of just...
I do that too.
You're like, I get what I'm doing. I get that you get what I get that I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's again why I love middle schoolers too. They get it. They'll go there. They'll play with you there. But it's, you know, but it really is that if you're not still learning, you shouldn't be teaching because you're not really teaching like exact skills, especially nowadays. Even though there's plenty in math, it's like, I try to explain this all the time because you're like, well, when are we going to use this? You might not. But
there's no way of knowing for any of the stuff you're learning because the job field's always changing.
Yeah, first off, why is math the one that gets that attack? Like, when have you used Beowulf?
Yeah.
Okay?
Or chemistry.
Yeah.
Or any
come on, let's chill out with that. It's every subject. But anyway, but that's not to mean that none of them are valuable. They're all valuable. It's all styles of thinking. Like, if I wasn't a good writer, I mean, I'm a math teacher. You might not think it matters, but it affects my job. Like, I have to write emails all the time. I write comments about report cards for kids. I have to write some reports sometimes. Like in music, I have to write. I have to be well spoken. I have to have learned some things about science, but mostly I had to learn about the scientific method and the procedures of experimenting.
Yes, exactly.
And you got to learn logic skills. And you got to learn about problem solving. And no, you might not use a proportion to solve your problems, although I have. I have used proportions to solve monetary issues with bands.
That's amazing.
You can ask Judah. I did it for him. We set up an algebra equation and solved it.
Oh my God.
But
that's so fitting.
It's a style of thinking, though. Your life has things you can't change, and it has rules. It's a little more flexible than math is, but there are things there are rules and things that you can't change about whatever problem you have, and you have to work your way through that and figure out how to creatively get out of it. And I really don't think you do that if you don't have a math teacher push you there.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I think it's so important to reiterate again how each person has a different temperamental mindset. Like our brains are wired differently. Like some students learn quicker with math skills. Some students learn, like I was much more abstract, always been more creative. So I was terrible at like the confines of math. I think that really is what it is. Like you said, like learning to work your way out of a box that you've built. That's been the ongoing struggle of my life. I mean, to this day, I'm really highly conceptual, highly abstract, and it's always been like I had like a tutor at one point because I literally was like struggling so bad I might have failed. 2 points. One was in I think 6th grade, the other one was in my senior year of high school. Like I've always had issues with it, and I think it's important to acknowledge, like that works both ways. Like there's going to be kids who struggle conceptually. There's a reason that some kids grow up to be bankers, some kids grow up to be, people that work in advertising like I do. I mean, it really dependent on the brain, and like you said, I think it's so important again to say that it's all of these things can be tied into the human experience on some level, and having that holistic mindset and approach to teaching is so great because what you're doing, like you said, like, hey, if I stop loving teaching, I'll stop teaching. You could take the mindset that you've developed through teaching, through everything that you're speaking about here, and use that same skill set in so many other fields, like consulting, PR, business management, life coaching. Like there's so many fields that require the exact holistic understanding of the human experience and learning that you can pass on, essentially. So it's like it's great to again just like have that worldview that you're developed at this point to sustain yourself, I guess, long term.
Yeah, I really feel like it's kind of like a bigger sinus thing that school. It's they don't give you the I don't know, like they make you become a whole person. Like you don't get to leave Ursinus with a degree and that be like the only thing that you did there. Like I have a bachelor's degree in math and I have a teaching certification, and that is not all that I am. And a big part of that is because of what I worked on at Ursinus. Like people don't. My roommate. So Christy lives with me, but also my roommate Devin went to Ursinus too, and we joke all the time about we get crazy emails from people, and we're just like, you don't leave Ursinus writing emails like that.
That's great. Hey, I can give props to Ursinus. I've only ever been in the library, I think. I walk my dog through the campus like every day because I live right there, so I'm always walking through it. It's a beautiful campus. That's great though, man. No, I think that's all. Those are great points, and props to your college or the university, I should say.
No, it is college. College,
right, college, for all that. So, dude, this has been great. I feel like that's a good note to end on. We've hit a lot.
We have
in this conversation. Was there anything else you wanted to add or touch on?
I don't know. We could keep talking for another couple hours. Yeah. My voice is getting tired.
I know, dude. Oh my god. And I'm just like my brain. I want people. If anyone's still listening at this point in the podcast, I want people to remember what I said at the very beginning of the podcast. I am just on like no sleep and travel confusion in my mind. So I don't know if it's helping me or making it, because how sometimes it makes it better. You get like extra sharp because you're like on edge. Like,
yeah.
Maybe I'm on edge. I don't know, but no, it's been great, man. I really appreciate the time, and you're a great guy. And like I'm glad this 4th time's a charm, right?
Whatever it was, yeah. No, it's been great. I really appreciate you having me.